Flies. So again, thanks for coming. We're here in DOES Liverpool, in Kempston Street, in the Fabric District, in the Knowledge Quarter of Liverpool. I say that, I know you know where we are, but I say that because we're live streaming and recording this for posterity. So if any of you don't particularly want to be on camera, stay towards the back of the room and you won't be on camera. Yeah, thanks Dan. So a little bit of quick housekeeping. If you hear a really annoying droning noise and I'm not talking, that's probably the alarm. Very simple. If the alarm goes off in that very unlikely event, straight through the door at the back of the building, down the stairs and out the front until we give you the all clear. How many of you here are new to DOES Liverpool? Just a few. You may know that we're a co-location and hack space. This is our events room. You're very welcome later on to call one of us, myself, Dan, Adrian, one of the others. We'll happily show you around the main space where we have desks, various hack space facilities, laser cutters, CNC machines, sublimation printers, all sorts of fun toys. So it's probably enough background for you all. We're very lucky indeed to have Rich and Will here from Belena.io. Which is, how long have you guys been going now?
I think it was about, was it 2011? Something like that? It's quite a while.
Yeah, a number of years. These guys specialize in managing fleets of IoT devices, particularly they're leveraging Docker, which came out of a cloud technology. And one of the great insights they've had is that you can take this and you can put it onto embedded systems, embedded Linux systems in particular, and they have this great ecosystem and workflow that enables us to put our development together in a really kind of productive and fast manner and deploy and build and target different hardware platforms and manage those platforms in the field, in the real world. But they know a lot more than me about all this stuff, so I'll get out of the way and I'll hand over to you guys.
Cheers, Alex. Hello, so I'm Rich, in case anybody didn't get the Rich and Will. So we've got a nice demo for you today. We're going to go through some introduction first. Just by show of hands, who hasn't heard of or used Belena at all? Okay, about a third. That's good. Okay, so for those of you who do know what it is, this bit might be a little bit dull. But what I'll just do is briefly go over a little bit about the company in terms of what our sort of offering is and what we do. Alex put it quite well. We manage, or I think the term we use is we reduce the friction for fleet owners. So I don't know if any of you guys specifically have like IoT-based devices that use small things like Raspberry Pis. It's a really common one. We get most of our people use Raspberry Pis. Obviously, you're probably aware of a lot of the friction that you have to go through in terms of building software for it, packaging that software up, deploying it, managing it when it's in the field. And so our goal is to make your lives easier. And so any part of that chain where we can help, that's where our products try to fit in. We'll cover that off in the demo specifically. So if anybody's unclear what any of those mean, then just, it's coming, don't worry. So yeah, use the old trackball as a thing. So as I say, Raspberry Pis is quite a common thing, but it's not the only thing that we are known for and what we do. We actually have a suite of products. So I'll talk about these a little bit because some of them you may or may not have heard of. So Belena Cloud, that's our main offering. So we have a software as a service that you can go to. I know that some of you specifically have used this. I've been talking to you this evening. And coupled with that, we have Open Belena, which is relatively new as far as the company is concerned. So we released Open Belena last year, around about November time. Not last year, the year before. The old January troubles. And essentially, this was a separation of the two parts of the product. So Open Belena is what Belena Cloud is based on, but we wanted to put something out there to the community. And you can run this yourself. There's a smaller feature set, obviously. There are differences, but functionally, it works in much the same way, and it is a direct dependence. A dependency of Belena Cloud. The other things you may have seen on there are perhaps a bit less common. So Belena OS is our own operating system that we produce. Part of the reason for that is that if you control all the parts of the chain, you can have more reliability out of it. So, but I'll talk a bit more about them later on. But the other thing is Balena Engine, and that's a customized version of the Docker or the Moby project. So, just again, show of hands, just for my benefit, how many of you have used Docker? Good. This is going to be better. We can relax.
All right.
For those that haven't, I will try and make sure I cover off the smaller parts in detail. But if you have any questions, we're going to try and keep the demo really low key. So you can either just shout up or come and catch me afterwards, whichever suits you. That's fine. So we have our own engine, and again, it's for the same reason. If we've got control of that, then we can guarantee better reliability. A company that you will know of that does this a lot is Apple. And they do it for the same reasons. If you can control all of those bits of the chain, you get a better customer experience. The bottom two are what I would probably say as like our tangibles as such. So Etcher, I bet a lot of you will have heard of Etcher. There's a nice story for Etcher about how it came to be and how a lot of you probably have heard of it. Essentially, it was there to replace people running the DD command. And historically, there weren't very many good tools for Windows that did that. So, I mean, there are now some more things like Rufus and everything else, but the aim of Etcher was to provide like a seamless experience, no matter whether it was Mac, Windows, or Linux, in terms of trying to write operating system images to SD cards. It's a really interesting piece of software. If you ever get a chance, if you haven't heard of it, go and have a look at it. If you have heard about it, go and dig underneath a little bit more some of the features that it actually has. There's some fascinating stuff. The engineering team behind it are absolutely top-notch guys, and they really know what they're doing. It's really fantastic. If you want a good laugh, go and read our support forums for it, because it's a really easy-to-use tool, but it confuses a lot of people. And actually chip in, get involved and help people if you do know the answers to things there. And the final one is the fin. Now that's a bit more specific in terms of its target. So has anybody in the room heard of a Balena fin? Yeah, I'm expecting only a few people. I've got one with me today that I can hand around. In fact, I'll pass it around now. We're going to demo with one as well. So for those of you who just take a look, pass it on. Our fin is a carrier board for the compute module. So the Raspberry Pi Foundation made the compute module available primarily to make it a bit more consistent for people who are integrating them into other pieces of hardware. So it's a common form factor, it gets a longer service life in terms of its support. And they also announced their own carrier boards at the same time. What we did is decided that, again, if we've got control of the hardware, then we've got more reliability. So the fin is a product directly that comes out the back of that. What we've also done is added to that extra things that are more, like extra features that are much more useful for people who are integrating. So it can take much higher voltage ranges, so up to 30 volts DC. As anybody who's worked with Raspberry Pis knows, a typical Raspberry Pi can only take a 5 volt via its USB jack or directly on the GPIO headers, but it would be up to you to provide that voltage. So things like that we've added. It's also got a better operating temperature range. So if you're going to put this into an outdoor environment, then it can operate better in terms of getting hot, getting cold. It comes with a mini PCI slot on the bottom, which exposes the USB lane. So if you've got a cellular connected device, it's much easier to go and buy a small MPCIe format modem, get that clipped into the bottom. We take all the SIM card stuff onto the main board, so you've got access to put SIM cards in it, and that all works. There's also an onboard co-processor. So if you have anything where you have very low-level hardware and you need like microcontroller level access, so I don't know if any of you guys have ever used like Arduinos or things like that, it's got its own co-processor built in on the board. So you can put the main board asleep, turn off the high power using ARM core that's on the compute module, and then when you need to wake it up, you've got a low power one that can wake up the system. It's a fantastic board, and it's priced pretty reasonably, I think. I'm not sure of the exact pricing, so I won't say it and get it wrong, but take a look, and if it is something that you're using commercially and you're really interested in getting a good quality board, then just get in touch with us, because we'd love to work. We're looking for partners on this all the time. We're going to use one in our demo, incidentally, so I'll come to that a bit later on. But yeah, so those are the main factors when it comes to Balena. So again, we are a bit of a software company in some ways. We offer tools that are there to help you develop the better products. So we're an enabler, a bit of a mouthful to say. And it really is as simple as those 4 steps in terms of how you push stuff. Now, it can be a little bit confusing to people who have never used the technology stacks before, and I'm sure they would say, like, no way is it that easy. Once you understand the concepts, it really is that easy. The demonstration that we're going to do, we're going to make a product in front of you. I'm not going to lie and say that we haven't done any Blue Peter moments. There is some prepared code. I'm not crazy enough to write code in front of a live audience. But we are going to talk about that in real time, and I can put my hand on my heart and say that it took me less than 3 hours to write the software that we're going to deploy. And we will be doing a prototype to production demo. So what we'll be left with is something you could feasibly stick in a housing. If you've got a 3D printer or a pre-made housing, then you could put it in there and take it out to market. It's that easy to make stuff with our platform stack. So touched on it briefly, Balena OS. For those of you who are like really low-level software guys, this is really cool. So we build our own base layer images, and then we include all of the bits that we need into it. So Balena engine gets included into there. We also handle all of the configuration at a really low level. So it's a repeatable system every time you want it, and it only has a very small exposure surface in terms of like TCP socket ports, things like that. One of the key factors, really key, minimized SD card writes. The number of failures that we see from like Raspbian-based devices is where the system will be logging continuously to an SD card, and for those of you that know how SD cards work, that's not good. They effectively they wear out. They can't take as many writes as we would like them to. So we have done things specifically to reduce that, to increase the reliability of things like Raspberry Pis running on SD card. There's loads more in there, and I'm not going to try and go through it in too much detail, because I think for the guys who know about all this stuff, like, come and speak to me afterwards if you want more detail. I'm more than happy to speak to you about it, but for those that not, it might be a bit of a snooze fest. So since you've all had beer, I'm going to move on. Again, Balena engine, as we touched on, it's the Moby engine, but we've tweaked it. So the underlying stuff is kind of there, but it's optimized for an embedded system. Deltas, which is mentioned on the right, it's a proprietary bit of code that we built into it, and effectively means, for those of you that do know what Docker is, if you do an image pull and then you need to update to a new image and you pull down that image, like, you'll have noticed there's layers that line up, okay? And if you add another layer, then obviously you've already got the first few, you just need the new one. Well, you can think of deltas as a bit like that, but it's sub-layer. So if you've got 2 images that are completely disparate in terms of what they have in there, it does a diff against the 2. So in most cases, if you're pulling in like a change to your Node.js app, you may have 2 or 3 image layers that are different, in which case normally you'd have to pull in quite a lot. But with the deltas enabled, it can be as small as, say, 1 or 2 meg. So if you're running something on a cellular connection, this is an absolute bandwidth saver. And that's all built into our Balena Cloud Suite. So just by using it together, it all just works. Again, I'm not going to bore people with the bits that are boring. Come and talk to me afterwards if you need to know more. Open Balena, I can talk a bit more about this one since I'm one of the core maintainers for Open Balena. So again, just a quick show of hands, who's heard of Open Balena or used it? Cool. Do you guys use the forums? Yeah? You'll have seen me in the forums. Most of the forum posts end up getting pinged towards me to try and help out with. So Open Balena is like the open source foundation that Balena Cloud is built on top of. So there are less features, but the main core functionality is still there. So container management or service management's there, device management's there. You have to build locally instead of building in the cloud, but you can push those out to your devices and they'll all get updated and managed the same way. So it's a great option in 2 sort of scenarios. I've talked briefly today with one guy, Matt. He's got a really good use case of why he's using Open Balena, and that is the control factor. It all runs on his network, in his hardware, all within his own domain. So in effect, he hasn't got any concerns from a security perspective or anything else. He's really made himself isolated, and that's fine. And the other option is, like, if you're commercially using Balena Cloud, you may want to know that should anything happen to Balena, then there is a way for you to not kind of be in a disaster problem. You know, you could migrate your devices to Open and then work out what you need to do to move yourself forward, but you're not left stranded. And that was the reason that we really pushed to get that product out. It's a really cool project. If you want to have any help sort of getting involved with it, then jump on the forums. You'll see one of us will get involved. If you're lucky, you'll get me. If you're really lucky, you'll get Will. But yeah, it's a great product, and if you want to learn more about how the underlyings work, it's a good place to start. The fin we've already briefly talked at. There's loads of documentation, by the way, on the fin online. So there's a website. If anybody wants anything, that's the place to go. So if you go to our main landing page, Belena.io, there'll be a link to the fin. Comes in a nice box. So yeah, the key part really for Belena Cloud is that for most people, when they start prototyping, they need something that's like easy to get, easy to sign up to, and they don't have to go and ask the line manager for the credit card. The first 10 devices are always free, so you get to experience all of the key features of Belena Cloud. There are some features that are only exposed to like paying customers, but they tend to be more around like team management things. So they wouldn't be really applicable to most people in that like sub 10 device area. So if you want to look at any of this, whatever we're showing today, it will all be available. You guys can go and have a look as well. Sign up, there's no cost. It's really quick and straightforward. Onto the demo. So we wanted to do a nice demo for you guys today. A lot of times we focus on software demo, but we thought software's a bit boring. Everybody does software. So we wanted to come along and bring some hardware to the picture. So I spoke to Will and we said, wouldn't it be great if we could like build something into a car? But I didn't think we'd be able to get a car in the room. So we've brought a car with us. So for those that haven't seen it, if you're at the back, this is our car, okay? I'll give you a background on the car, but the car is not the focus for this point. So this is a car, but it's a prop of a car. But it does do a lot of the things that a car would do. So for example, it has headlights, it has some emergency lights, it has a siren, and it also has a CAN bus. Okay? So for those in the room that don't know what CAN bus is, CAN stands for Controller Area Network, and it's a protocol that cars use internally as well as to communicate with diagnostic equipment in order to sort of read information about what's going on the car. Most cars these days are probably 90% electronic in terms of how they operate. So we decided we'd shrink a car, and we brought one with us. So this car, we don't need to know too much about it, what's on the inside. If anybody does want to know what's on the inside, come and see me afterwards and I'll show you all the fun. But what you need to know is that there is a CAN bus on the back of this, and there is some lights and some sounds on this that we can control and we can see the state of. And the product that we're going to build for you in our demo is we're going to take from a prototype, an understanding of what we want to do, all the way to a working product. And we're going to build that using a fin. It's going to be connected on a cellular network. It's going to connect into the car, and hopefully we have got a bench power supply. We were going to try and run the fin off effectively a 24-volt power feed, because it's a truck. And for those who don't know, commercial vehicles run on 24 volts. So poses some issues. So we're going to go through this demo. We're going to talk about the choices that we're going to make in terms of our hardware. No surprise, we're going to choose Belena Cloud, but we're going to try and explain to you why we're choosing that, and hopefully kind of get your brains ticking along the lines of, you know, if I was building something, a real product, something I was going to take to market, then are these, you know, could I do it better? Is there a way I could do it faster, or is there a way that I could achieve a better result than what we're going to achieve? So I'll just switch over the presentation. Okay. Thanks for that. So, from prototyping to production, I appreciate some applause at this point, only for the photography, because that was at about 1 o'clock last night on my kitchen worktop, so thank you. So, our thing. We talk about Internet of Things, you know, everyone says IoT, but actually we need to have a thing before we can have an Internet of. So, we touched on it there, we have a vehicle. What's the want? So we want to see and change the state of these systems on the vehicle, but we want to do it from a web application, because the world loves web applications. They work on iPads and The world seems to want to go iPads. Even MOT stations are iPads these days. Craziness. So we're going to build this system, and it does need to be fit for purpose. Okay, so if we're going to put this out there, if we imagine this emergency vehicle with these lights on is from the West Midlands Fire Service, for example, it's going to go on a fire engine. So therefore, it needs to, be able to live on a fire engine. We don't want it rattling to pieces, or the SD card falling out as it's driving down the road. So we need to choose hardware that's going to be suitable for the job. Again, we're going to be going on cellular, so we need to take that into consideration. What modems are we going to use? Well, can we even use a modem with our choice? Yep, we know what hardware we're going to need. A big part of this as well is that if we're going to build a system that's going to interrogate these vehicle systems, what do we do if we need to update it? Yeah, like it's all good and well designing it to work right here on that little green car. But then what do I do in 6 months' time when the lights fail and they put a new model of lights on it and it doesn't work the same way? I need to be able to update it. It's not just about a one-time deal, We need to think about how we're going to actually integrate our hardware with this. So we've talked about CAN, so we're going to need CAN controllers. There's other hardware here at play. There's not just our platform that we're going to run it on. We need an interface hardware. So obvious choice would be something like a Raspberry Pi 3. So again, I'm going to assume most people here have heard of a Raspberry Pi. Number one reason for choosing it is cheap. Okay, cheap always wins in a commercial scenario, in my experience, but it's not always the best reason for winning. It has a massive community of users, which is good. Apologies if you can't read it, by the way. I wasn't sure if the colours would come through. It seems okay from where I am, but if anyone can't see, I'll read them all out. So a Raspberry Pi 3 is also really powerful. When you compare it to other sort of microcontroller type scenarios like Arduinos. So I don't know if anyone in the room's ever used an Arduino, you'll know what I mean, but it's an 8-bit microcontroller. It runs at about 16 megahertz, something like that. It's not really designed to do computing tasks at a high level. It's more designed to do like operational control. So it does very low, very fast operations. We need to have support for wireless LAN, and the Raspberry Pi gives that to us. If we go and choose like a 3B or something like that, that's got onboard wireless. So that's good. It doesn't help us with the modem scenario, but it does give us some connectivity there. Provisioning of SD cards with sort of Raspbian images. So the Raspberry Pi Foundation put out Raspbian, and that is their sort of official operating system. Other operating systems are available, other distributions of Linux are available, but sort of officially supported. Let's remember we're making a product. We're going to sell this. Yeah, we don't want to be having to take all the responsibility on ourselves. So we're going to have to provision an SD card with Raspbian. So that could pose us a challenge. It's not necessarily an easy step. SD card corruption. For those who don't know, SD cards, as we've touched on, don't like writes, or not too many of them. So we need to factor that in. Are we going to have to buy expensive SD cards, or because there are some SD cards out there that will take this into consideration, but they're not cheap. It's also not really designed for use in an industrial or a commercial setting. At the end of the day, the Raspberry Pi Foundation made the compute module for that. That was their goal. They had already identified that there was a demand for this type of product, but not in that form factor. So we're kind of picking something that works, but we're not perhaps using it the way it should be used. And the final point I've put on here, and if anyone has any others they want to add to this, they're more than welcome to shout out, but 5-volt power from a micro USB cable or from the GPIO header if you build it yourself. As I say, this has got to be fit for purpose. If it's going in the back of a truck that's bombing down the road, are you going to trust that little phone connector hanging out the back? And what happens if it comes out? Is that going to be mission over? End of the day. So it's not perhaps the best choice, but it is in some ways a good choice. In terms of our CAN interface, there are marketable products that get us there. Okay, so that's kind of nice for us. We can go and buy a CAN shield. It's built in with support on the device. There's schematics, data sheets that show us how it all works. So that's kind of good. So from that perspective, the Pi does win out because it does have this kind of support. And then in terms of software, what could we write this in? We're going to have to write some software. I don't think we're going to get lucky enough to just have it done with no code. But we've got easy choices out there for most people. Python, Node.js, really common languages. There are others. I just went with ones that I knew kind of people in the room would have heard of. We've got things like JSON software. If you try to do JSON on small microcontrollers, it's a very sort of wordy protocol in terms of like keeping data together. So perhaps not a great choice for that. Things like TLS. So we're going to access this over a web application. We've got to factor in security. I mean, right now it's lights, but I mean, what else could it be? I mean, in different scenarios, it could require that data to be protected. You know, you don't want necessarily people able to read it. So cryptography, like you'd get in TLS, can be a little bit heavy-handed on some devices, but yeah, the Pi can handle that fine. In-life updates, this is kind of key as well. This is a big part of this. So if we go with a Raspberry Pi, just what you would get off the shelf on all the tools that are out there, you're going to have to create custom update scripts, cron jobs to check for updates. Maybe you'd package your software as in like a Debian package. But in which case you're going to have to put it into a repository. So for those Linux people in the room, know what I'm talking about. For those who don't, you've got to find a home to put it on the internet so that you can pull it when you need it. You've got to manage migrations. So if you've got one of these, I don't know, goes offline for say 2 weeks and you release 2 software updates, how's it going to handle going from sort of version 1 to version 1.3? You know, you're going to have to factor that into your consideration when you're building this. And also, how are you going to handle failures? Like, there's a lot of other stuff around there. So it's perhaps a good choice, but we could maybe make it better. And that's where we come in. So this is the stuff we talked on earlier. What do we do? So we have an embedded OS, so we can focus that on the board. Raspberry Pi is supported, conveniently enough, which is always good. We have build tools, so you can build your software, package it up using the Docker image format, and run it on the device. This takes care of a lot of the headache that we would have faced otherwise. There's no need to build Debian packages or handle things like that. This is Docker, so we can just say this is the image you should have, and it will have the right software. And if you want to upgrade it, it will run that version. You can think of them as being completely separate sandboxed processes. Fleet management. So at the moment, we've got 1 truck. What about when we have 10,000 trucks? How are we going to manage the process without some kind of management layer? We have that. Network access. How are we going to access the web portal that's on the devices? So you've got these devices that are going to be deployed in the back of fire engines, connected on 3G. How are you going to get to that web page to control or to view what's going on there? Yeah. And then finally, you've got the hardware. So we actually do have a hardware solution that does make this fit for purpose, because it does have the wide operational temperature range, the wide voltage inputs, the fact that it's designed around an industrial main processor, the compute module. So actually, Balena offered a solution to every one of our problems in that scenario. We also have a nice workflow, or I certainly think it's a nice workflow. So we can develop locally on a Raspberry Pi and then migrate to a fin, because a Raspberry Pi and a fin are fundamentally the same architectural type underneath. They're all ARM processors. So we can work with Raspberry Pis, which are cheap. We talked on that earlier. You know, they're easy to get hold of, don't cost much money. We can run the same operating system on both of these devices. So we've got a standard between what we're going to deploy and what we're going to work on. We build the applications in the same way. You know, we can think of these devices as being kind of spiritually the same, but they're in different bodies. So that works for us. We can also develop the software locally, which is what we're going to do in a minute. We're actually going to push some software to this Raspberry Pi that's on the desk in front of me, and we're going to make changes to it. We're going to see those changes reflected live. We mentioned it in there. It's called Live Push. It's a really, for those of you that have used Docker, that's going to really change the way you think about it, because it's really smart. We actually use this mechanism for developing Balena Cloud in this same mechanism here. And we can also manage like the host-specific configuration for these devices. So again, those who've used Raspberry Pis, you'll have heard of things like DT overlays and DT params, and it's all about how you configure the hardware interfaces on the hardware. Like how would you manage that if you didn't have a management layer? And we offer that as part of our solution. So you don't have to worry about making sure they're configured in, you know, you just need to know what they should be configured in, and we make sure that it's kept in that state. And then finally, when we deploy it, it should just be a straight move to the fin. We can actually add the fin into the same application. We can see them side by side. We offer tools to pre-configure it. So from in a warehouse scenario, you know, I don't know if any of you guys have ever dealt with hardware being provisioned in a warehouse. I have, and it's a scary place to be when it's happening. It's a lot of people standing there passing boxes down and plugging them in and all sorts of stuff. But the key fact is that you have to have the tool sets available to even make that possible. And we offer those tools as part of what you get with Balena Cloud. And we'll demonstrate that later. We'll show you how that works. And as I've already said, it's hardware compatible with the Pi. So that CAN module that we're going to use, and we know that we can get from a supplier, we can just take off and put on the fin, and we know that it will work because it worked on the Pi. So it gives us a really nice, prototype to production phase. So now I get to sit at the computer, and we're going to go through a little introduction to Balena Cloud, just nice and high level. You can sit down if you want. Yeah, don't have to hover.
I feel like your security guard here, to be honest.
I don't need one. While I just get this ready, if anyone has any questions, then just shout them at Will, and he can earn his keep.
Good question.
Shoot.
I saw at some points there's an application called Corroboros or something like this. It's like a security camera system, and it uses Etcher. And the way it uses Etcher is it allows you to configure all these variables in the same way that you can on the dashboards. Like what SSID I'm connected to, what Wi-Fi I'm connected to, or what I want the host name to be, etc. And it does all of that in the Etcher interface, and I'm just wondering what that is and if that's something that...
I've never even heard of it, so I can't comment too much.
No,
this is news to us, I'm afraid.
I'll talk to you afterwards.
Yeah, well, let's talk after I'm working out, though.
Cool.
Any questions I can answer? Yeah, sure.
On your Balena OS, you're talking about supporting Raspberry Pi. What other platforms are supported?
Oh, it's quite the list. Can you pull something up, Rich?
What I'm really interested in is, I've got a system I've been developing that is based around a rejig Big or Blown Black.
We did.
Big or Blown Black.
There it is, yeah.
Yeah, this is I'll tell you what, give me a second. So all I've done here is I've gone to our balenacloud.com, dashboard.balenacloud, and I've logged in. You can log in with your GitHub. So if you've got a GitHub handle, it's just a auth straight in. You'd be presented with an empty dashboard. There's a little sign-up wizard, which is just name, email, the usual stuff. Nothing too personal. And then it drops you here. So we're going to do this. This is the first time we've done this demo live. So please be kind if it doesn't work. So yeah, to answer your question, what devices do we support? So an application is tied to a device type. We do support mixed fleets, and so that would be any device that falls under the same architectural type. So if I was to have Raspberry Pi, then it would include things like the fin or a Raspberry Pi. So a Raspberry Pi 3 would also include a Raspberry Pi 2, because architecturally they're the same. There's also things like the Odroid and a few other things. I'm not sure of all the names, I don't want to butcher them, but there's lots of other sort of Raspberry Pi clones that work on the same processor type and things like that, and they would all fall under it. So you can mix those devices in the application, but for example, I couldn't add, at the moment, a Raspberry Pi with an Intel NUC, okay? Because one's an x86 64, the other is an ARM, so it won't let us do that. It is something that we're looking at in terms of how we could support that and things, and so yeah, in the future, that statement might be wrong, but as it is today, not quite. So in terms of the devices we support, there's a lot. I'll go through them slowly, so if you've got one in mind that you're thinking of, then you may see it. But essentially, pretty much all of the big ones that I'm not aware that there's any that we are currently not qualified for.
You only come to mind.
That are big, yeah. Obviously, there's quite a contingent of Raspberry Pi, since they've got so many different ones. We also have 64-bit support for Raspberry Pi, not just the 3, but also the 4. And I think I'm right in saying that we're the only 64-bit?
We were certainly the first. Whether we're still the only, I don't know.
Yeah, I think that's right. So yeah, if you choose Raspberry Pi 4, then it's actually an ARM 64. So for people who've tried to run, I think it's MongoDB, you have to have 64-bit OS support. So yeah, I think if you pull a Raspbian image, it's not. I think it's 32.
Yeah.
So yeah, if you wanted to run Mongo on a Raspberry Pi 4, we might be the only way you can do that. So yeah. And so, yeah, and we have a lot of older stuff as well, like the IoT 2000. I don't know if any of you guys have ever heard of that one. I think it's a bit more an older platform now, but that's still on our supported list. It's not used as often, but it is still there. So yeah, quite a few boards. And you can also have custom boards. So if you wanted to sort of have your own device board type and you were going down that route, Yes, you can do that. It's totally possible. You can't pick it off a list, but you can do it. So yeah, so we're gonna crack on with this one. So I think we'll just call this vehicle control. I would be lying if I said I hadn't called it that before. We want to target Raspberry Pi 3. We're not going to go 64-bit for now. We're just going to go with 3. And then this is where you choose your sort of level. So everybody can choose starter. And this is the one where you get your 10 free devices, uses our microservices level of platform. There are some others, you'll see them in the list, essentials and microservices. So the microservices one is effectively like the paid for version of starter. And then essentials, I think, is more of like a legacy hang-up. So it only allows you to run one container. So there are some customers that we have who want to pay us, but they don't need all of the feature set, and that's what that's for. But typically, you know, microservices or starter, and in our case, starter, because it's free. So we're going to create that. Now, in our backend, lots of things have just happened, but the bits that really are relevant to what we're going to talk about, you're going to see here. So, if anybody is interested in trying to understand all of our ecosystem, again, just come and grab me afterwards, and I can give you a bit more of an in-depth understanding of what we're doing in the background. I'll be honest with you, there's bits even I still don't understand. It's a very complex system. Okay, so we've got our application. Obviously, there's no code or anything there. So we need to add a device to our system. So from here now, this is our little add device wizard. It will only show us compatible things here. So we shouldn't be able to choose you know, Intel compute sticks or anything like that, because they're not compatible architecturally with the Raspberry Pi. So when we talk about the mixed fleets, we could take your BeagleBone Black and drop it in on this application. So we're going to obviously stick with the Raspberry Pi 3 because that's what we're developing on. So I've got a Raspberry Pi 3 here. Anyone who's never seen one before, it's there, but I think we've all seen one, so we're good. We get a choice of OS version. So this is our current latest. We've got a couple of others that are presented. You can actually see all the outdated versions and pick one all the way back to sort of 2.12. I think 2.12 came out before I joined the company, so at least 18 months ago, something like that. It's quite a long way back. I'm actually going to choose 2.38. It'll become apparent why later on, but it's not really of a relevance. I could just as easy choose this, but for the demo, I want to choose 2.38. I'm going to be doing development with this board locally, so I'm going to choose the development edition versus the production edition. We'll touch on it now because I think the subtleties are small. So a production image is what you actually put out there in the wild, okay? And what we do is we enforce SSH key usage. You can't use a password. You cannot put the devices into local mode. They have to stay in as a production device. You can think of it as like the hardened version. It's what you want out there where random people could kind of connect to it and mess with it. We want to make sure that doesn't happen. So that's what you use.
There's no serial on the production boards either.
That's right, no serial. But again, it's designed to be a product as opposed to a development platform. Whereas the development image is the opposite. So we allow passwordless entry to SSH. Because it's not designed to be out there. We don't want you to put it anywhere where someone could get access to it. We have a serial output for the kernel on boot, so you can monitor what's going on. I think we also display that to the screen, don't we? Isn't that the other difference?
I think it just goes straight to the lane of image, doesn't it?
Yeah, but you can actually access the messages.
I can't blast
something like
the
that.
screen to the device.
Essentially, it's the one you want for what we're doing now. So we're going to choose that. Connectivity, Ethernet or Wi-Fi. I know that the Wi-Fi works, but I've got Ethernet, so I'm going to choose that. If you choose Ethernet, it just lets you put in the SSID and the passphrase, so you can get it connected quite quickly. If you want to just do this at home, that will then put a box straight on your Wi-Fi. We'll go Ethernet, because I've got the cable. Make it easy. Download. What this should do is spit us out a zip file of an image, which it does. Marvellous. What this image is going to do is, you can think of it as it's a Balena OS bare image, but it's been configured to talk to Balena Cloud on this application. It's got some a provisioning key in there so that the platform will exchange it with a device-specific key, and it will provision the device onto this application. Okay. If I gave you that image and you put it on your Pi, then your Pi would turn up in my application. Yeah, it's that simple. we have good internet here, because that worked quite fast. So just let me pull up my terminal. Where my mouse gone? There we go. So, because I'm running Ubuntu, this is a little bit easier if you're on a Mac, but because I'm running Ubuntu, I have to do some smarts. So I've downloaded Etcher, and it's in my downloads directory. So I'm just going to run, that's the one. Do you know what? When you can't see your whole thing because it's halfway off the screen, trust me, it'll come back. Okay. So I'm just going to run Etcher and I'll put the window back on the screen. So this is Etcher, which we talked about earlier. So we want to flash this image to Raspberry Pi, so it's going on an SD card. Okay, so I've got one here in my SD card reader. I'm going to choose my downloads, and it was this one. So there's a bit given away in the name of the download. So it's got Balena Cloud, which is the instance it runs under. Vehicle Control, which is the application for Raspberry Pi running 238.0 Rev1. Dev image with a supervisor version 9.15.7. So, you know, if you just keep an archive of those, if ever you're interested, then that's how you can find out what they are. You don't have to extract the zip file. Etcher will do that for you. So that keeps it nice and simple. Choose your image and flash. So I've got a nice fast SD card and a fast reader, so we're doing this at about, what is it, 49, 50 megs a second?
55, yeah.
It will also do a verification. I turned it off for the purposes of the demo because I didn't want it to have to go through and just double check it, but it'll do a read-write check. So it'll write the image and then it'll bit check it to make sure it's written it correctly. I'm going to assume that it did. I've never seen one fail.
Well, this is where it's happening.
Touch whatever this is. Yeah, I've never seen one fail for me. That doesn't mean they don't fail. But yeah, I've always been fortunate. So we've just got our image. Pop this into the Raspberry Pi. So for those who've never seen one, in the back, just drop it in. Ethernet cable and power. If I get it the right way up. Okay. So, if we drop back to here now. So what's going to happen, the device is going to boot up off that card. It's going to take its OS base image. It's going to read the configuration file that was injected into it when we downloaded it to say that it should be on this application and with the credentials it needs to register. And it's going to pop up on the screen. He says. Again, anybody got any questions at this point? That must mean I'm doing a great job. Oh, we have a question. Come on.
So for the image that you're creating,
Yeah.
how easy is it to put in a customized code?
In terms of doing it from the dashboard, impossible. But if you want, you can build your own. So the build tools for the Balena OS are open source. I've actually got a repository of a Docker file that means that you can kind of in a one-liner build your own custom Balena OS. And then have you ever used or heard of Yocto or Open Embedded? Right, it's Yocto. So yeah, there's loads of information that we have about this, but in effect you pull in our repository. We have different BSP layers for, the main one is Meta Balena, and that is all of the core things. So like at OS config, we have a tool that reads our config JSON files and applies them to different services, reboots stuff and everything else. You can pull that in and just do a recipe for whatever you wanted to do. That would be fine. If you just wanted to do, on the topic of that, if you actually had a software piece and you wanted to just build a kernel module, then you can do that in a container. So you don't need to, so if it's a whole kernel you need, then yeah, you gotta do it your way. But if you just need to build a kernel module for say one of the audio DACs or something that goes on the hat, you can do that all within a software container. So I won't demo that because that's quite complex, but I can talk about what you need, or in the documentation it details it, but yeah. So this device has popped up, and we'll get a little bit of information about it. So we give it a random name. You can change the name, but you've got to give it something. We can see the UUID, which is its unique identifier. There is a full length one there. We'll just show the short version. We can see what device type it is. At the moment, you'll see that some of this information isn't yet populated. That's just getting populated in the background. So we have a supervisor process that runs, and that handles all of the communication between the device and the back end. It tells it when it needs to pull new software versions and all this kind of stuff. The other thing you'll notice is it says that it's online. That's actually because we have a VPN between that device and our back end. That VPN is used for inbound connections for us to talk to the device. So when we want to do stuff on here, like if I was to click reboot, for example, it actually has an HTTP call over that VPN to the supervisor, and it tells it to reboot the device. We also can send traffic over that VPN. So we'll look at that later, but it's a really nice feature. We do have some customers who turn that off. If they're using cellular and they're on a really constrained bandwidth and they really just want to make sure that there's nothing there, then you can turn it off. Obviously, you then sort of pay the penalty, which is you can't make inbound connections to the device anymore. You're at subject of its poll rates, but it is possible to do that. So.
And that is people who are really trying to push the bandwidth down.
Yeah,
tend to do that. We put quite a bit of effort into making it low on our own part anyway.
Yeah. So I'm going to leave that to do its thing for a minute. I would have expected it would have done it by now, actually, but I'm going to.
Why ain't taking so long?
Yeah, I did wonder, but I'm going to let it do its thing. There's no point rushing it. But while I'm here, I'll talk about. I'll just give you a quick overview of the actual panel. So we've got devices here, and this will show us all of the devices that we have. Actually, I'm going to be cheeky. I just unplug it and plug it back in again. The old adage that makes it work every time. It doesn't normally do that, so I'm really surprised. So fleet configuration. This is where you can do things like we just talked about, disabling the VPN. So this is configuration of like the hardware as opposed to configuration of the software that's running. So you'll see down here environment variables and service variables. I'll come to those, but they're relative to the software that you're going to put on the device as opposed to the configuration of the hardware. So things like whether you want it to run the VPN or not, that's not a software choice that you're ever going to get to make in your software. You're telling our software to not run that VPN. Yeah. Again, enabling or disabling logs. Some people don't like the fact that, or don't want the fact that their software will generate logs and that it will get shipped to us so they can see it, because that is what's going to happen. Because of bandwidth, for example, they turn that off. You can define the poll interval. It's really weird when I turn my head, it gets extra loud. You can define the poll interval. So that supervisor process we talked about, it comes in sort of every 10 minutes. There's a bit of jitter applied to it to make sure that it's not always that repetitive. So there's reasons why, but it's a good thing. Yeah, so you can configure that. Some people have that at, say, 10 minutes. That's what they want. Other customers we have make it once a day, and they just have it come in once a day. If it's a sort of a sensor platform and they're not really that bothered by the management aspect of it, and they just want the minimum amount of data, for example, because they're on cellular, then they'll up that. Let's go down. We've got persistent logging. So we talked earlier when it was on the screen about how we don't write to the SD card in Balena OS, and that counts for the system log. So if I just pull the power on the device, that's fine. That's not going to damage it. There's no issues with that, because it will never be trying to write to the device, or shouldn't be trying to write to the device with our software at least. The logs would get persisted. If you were running Raspbian, then your var log, everything else would be on disk, and so you'd see that. So you can enable persistent logging. So if you've got an issue where the device is, say, crashing or something like that, you can enable it. So we're not trying to take away everything you can do. You know, we kind of go with best practice and say you don't want that on, but in support, particularly if we get people with issues and they come to us, we'll say let's knock that on, and then we know that if they've got a reboot issue, we're capturing as much as we can possibly capture. That one's a bit boring. You don't need to worry about that one. Just trying to find the interesting ones. There's tons of stuff in here. So Delta updates, for example, they're optional. You either want them or you don't want them. We have some customers who really, really want them, other customers who really don't want them for whatever reason. So it's a configurable option. By default at the moment, it's off. We are actively working on making that the default. So you will have deltas on by default and off if you want to force it off. There's some complex reasons why it wasn't that way previously, and it was to do with the mixes of older OS versions in combination with newer OS versions and the way that they did deltas. But we're at a point now, I think, where we want to be making that the default. Things like enabling the UART. So again, people have used Pies. There's a UART on the GPIO pins, but you have to enable it. Things like that, so you can enable it. And then further down we have these custom ones. So, excuse me. This is where you do your things we talked about earlier about DT overlays and DT params. So for those who are not au fait with Pi World, what that's doing is it's telling the Broadcom chip how to configure the pin headers. So whether you want pins to be used for a particular function. And so certain pieces of hardware that go on, so this is our CAN hat that we're going to be using. This requires us to set some of these configuration parameters. So I don't want to be scrubbing around on a file system on an SD card to do that. I can just do it through the web interface, and the Pi will see that those are now different, and it will reboot and apply those values. So it's managed centrally. And it will do that for every device that we add to this fleet. You can override on a per device basis as well, but we won't need to do that. Environment and service variables. This is for your application. So I'll come back to this later, but just be mindful that there is a way for you to configure values that get passed to this device's software when it runs. So when you write your software and you want to pass custom information into that software, you can do it from here. So I'll demonstrate it because I can set the bit rate for the CAN bus, and I do it via a variable. So I want it to be running at, say, 10,000 kilobits instead of 500 kilobits. I can do it through here, and that means that if I get the setting wrong and I deploy it onto a truck, oh crap, this is a bad thing, I can just change it on here, it'll reapply its setting, reboot that software, and it's then using the new settings. So you can change things like that on the fly. Releases, this is when we've actually pushed some software, you'll see them, they'll all appear in here. So this allows you to see what software was released, a hash of that software, so you know which version you're on and everything else. You can see what services were in that software. So, for example, we have customers who start with a very small service stack and then they add and add and add and add and add. But it means they can go back to any previous one. If they want to run an older version of their software stack, they can choose it off here and they can run it. And this is where it shows up. It also gives you the build log so you can see how it worked. I don't know if any of you guys in here ever used like a CI system. Yeah? A little bit like that, Jenkins or something like that. You'll notice some similarities in terms of what that would have spit out and what that shows. Location, as everybody knows, we're in Liverpool. So we do actually have geo-IP lookups. So I can see from the public IP that the device has come in to us on, that geo-IP looks it up so we can see where it is. So apparently it's in Liverpool. That's good, because I'm glad it didn't say like Birmingham or something. That would have looked really bad. But you never know with geo-IP lookups. Members, this is, I was talking about this earlier, so this is more, you're probably not going to see this used much in terms of your starter applications. You can add members, so if you've got a team of say 2 or 3 people and you want to sort of all be able to see one device, then you can add team members here and they can have access to this application. There are limits to how much you can use it compared to the paid for plans, but not really anything to be too concerned with. If you're just building something as a starter, as a little project that you want to work on in a small team, like this would be fine. For instance, I added a colleague to my application the other day because I wanted to move a device between them, and that's how you do it. So for 1 or 2 people, you're fine. And then actions, this is just a general sort of settings page for the application. You can do things here like rename it, turn the public URL off and on. That's something we'll look at later. You can restart all the applications or restart all the devices if you need to for any reason. Grant support access. This is a very useful button. If you're a paid for customer, this gets you a hotline through to one of the fantastic people who work at Balena, including myself. What this actually allows them to do is, in effect, it kind of adds us as a team member for a very short period of time, but only with kind of read access level. So it means we can look at the logs on the device, we can sort of SSH into it and have a little look and see what's what. So if we get someone telling us they've got some issues, then we can take a look and try and help them out and get them moving again. You may have seen, if you read our forums, you will see people saying enable support access. That's what they mean. You can also do things like purging the data. So the way Docker stores its data is in things called volumes. And you can think of them as being like, Docker sort of sandboxes a whole application, but the volume sandboxes its storage components. So think of it as like adding a disk to a VM or in a cloud solution. What this allows you to do is just wipe those volumes off. So if for example, I don't know, Matthew, you talked about having that boy. Like, let's say some pirates rock up and rob off with your boy and you're worried about the data, then you'd purge it. Yeah.
So like even if the the body's gone, they've taken it offline.
As long as it came back in and got the message to say purge, it would purge. It would obviously need to connect at some point to get the message to say purge, but yeah. You can do reboots, you can do shutdowns, you can change the application type. So if you wanted, you could move it to a paid plan. So if you started off and you've knocked up your plan, so let's say again, I like Matthew's, he's got a project. So for those that don't know Matthew, he's got a project and he's done it using, I think you said you'd started with Balena Cloud, haven't you?
Yes.
So let's say you decided he was going to take it to production level and it was going to become a commercial entity. He might want to have more team members or support more than 10 boys because he's knocking them out the park. Then that's where he'd go to, and it would allow him to upgrade it effectively to a paid plan. It keeps all the same settings and everything else. So there's no risk to him in effect of choosing this as a starting point, because if he did go commercial, he can just take it to the next stage. Yeah. Transfer ownership's dull. We're not going to transfer any ownership today. Don't worry about it. But that's essentially if I bought Matt's company off him and I wanted all of his boys, I'd transfer it. It's kind of obvious. And delete the application, which we don't want to do. So we'll leave that one alone. So we'll pop back on here. Oh, that's actually an interesting page. Let's have a look at that. So yeah, when you've got multiple applications, it will show you how many are online. You can also see there's a little key underneath. So we do know when a device is online, configuring itself, getting updates and everything else, and you'll get a nice little slotted bar chart. So let's just jump on here, and everything should be happy now. It is. Okay, so we can see how long it's been online for. We can see what release it's running. Currently factory build. We've not pushed any software to it because we haven't written any software. We can see what it should be running. So you've got a concept of like state where you are today and where you want it to be. And so if for any reason it can't, you can actually tell a device not to update, for example. We'll cover that later, but that's what those are for. I can see what its IP addresses are. So at the moment, it's got this nice IP address here. I'm going to copy that because I'll need it. I can see the supervisor version, OS version, well, that's the one we told it to be, and I think the rest is the same. You also have some logs. So there's not really any logs on this because we've not told it, it's not doing anything. And we have a terminal. So for example, I can come down here and I can choose the host OS and I can drop into a terminal. And I can do, I don't know. Okay? The thing to boggle your mind about is that this device is connected to the same LAN that I'm on, okay? But I am not connecting to that device over that LAN IP, okay? This connection has gone from my laptop through the internet, off to our servers, down through the VPN, back through to this device and then terminated. So it doesn't matter if I put this device, I mean, I'm assuming there's probably some NAT in this building. We have a lot of customers with very like hard-end enterprise grade NATs. The way that our VPN works is it means we can get into those devices even if they're in those scenarios. Later on, we'll have this hooked up over 3G and that will still work, even though there's going to be probably 3 NATs, you know, in GIFGAF in terms of their network providers. There'll be plenty of NAT in the way, but we'll still get through to the device just fine. Touches the wood. But the nice thing about this is its consistency. You know, consistency is kind of key to everything we're going to talk about. If we can get into it this way, we should be able to get into it that way as well. So this allows us to get in there, see what's going on with the device. You know, if we were so inclined, we could see what's going on with the D message. It is a Linux system underneath it all at the end of the day. If you've got any Linux skills, then you'll know what all this is, and that's good. So there's the good stuff. So what I'm going to do now is I'm going to bring in, if it works, let's have a look. I've got a repo. So I made a little project, okay? And this is going to be the software for our demo, okay? We've got the hardware, he's running. So our investment of, say, £35 for our new product has been spent. I should have brought a chalkboard and like talked up how much we'd spent on this one. We've got some hardware we're going to develop on. We know we've already got our CAN hardware ready, so we need to connect that up and configure it. And we should be able to kind of get this vehicle doing something quite quickly, right? I made a nice project and I've segmented this down into tags. So this is publicly available. If you want links, I'll make them available, probably through Alex or something, so you can distribute them to everybody. If you want to go and see how this works, you want to look at this code, it's all there. Another thing I would, just a quick, to hark back to Balena and what we actually do, we've got tons of like featured projects. If you ever use Etcher, you'll see that it throws up a featured project and things like that. There's some really interesting ones on there, like building your own Bluetooth speaker thing with a Pi Zero and all this kind of stuff, really fancy stuff. Like, go and take a look at it. All the code that we put for that is available. You can see how it all works and everything else. Some really good learning resources.
The Bluetooth speaker one is called Balena Sound, if that was
Balena
particularly
Sound.
catching your ear.
So, we've already done the introduction, so I'll just quickly jump into the hardware. So here we have a file system that this is our software. So underneath all of this, everything we're about to do now is Docker. Okay, so if you haven't heard of Docker, this might be a little bit confusing, so I'll try and just make it as simple as possible. But if I can't make it any simpler and it doesn't make sense, then just come and speak to me at the end if there's any particular thing, and we'll try and push forward with it. So this is a Docker compose file. Think of this as the orchestration. This is going to say what services there are, what they're going to be called, where they're going to be built from, how they're going to be run, what environment they're going to be run in. So, and these then become processes. And those processes are then configured with this and run in a sandbox, a bit like an iPhone application is run in a sandbox. It can't talk outside of its context. So you define its run context, its run environment, and it runs like that. And if you want to change it, you have to destroy it and create it again with a new context and run it again. Okay? The term used for this is ephemeral. You want your services to be ephemeral. Okay? They exist to do a job, and then they don't exist. So in our service stack here, we've got one called can init and can dump. Okay? First things first, we need to get this can thing working. So that's why we're going to start with this part of the stack. So can init is going to take the contents of the can init directory, and it's going to use that as its build context. So we'll take a look at that in a minute, but that's all we need to know. It's going to go into that directory, take everything that's in there, it's going to make a build out of that, and that's going to be called can init. We have to use the host network mode. The way this can device exposes itself is as a network interface. And the way Docker works is if you don't tell it to use host networking mode, it gives it its own NAT network, and it completely abstracts all of the networking from you. So in order to have access to the host's networking interfaces, we have to run it in host mode. That's why it's there. You don't need to really worry about it much more than that, but I thought it was worth an explanation. These services also have capabilities, and you can limit their capabilities or expose certain capabilities to them. Now, we're going to be telling this interface to come up, come down, change some of the parameters of it, so we need the net admin capability. Now, all of these capabilities are Docker-specific things, and they're detailed on Docker's documentation stuff. So if you want to know more about that, that's the place to go for it. Restart, no. This is quite an interesting one. What this means is that when this process has run, it's going to exit. And normally, you'd want your service to be restarted, because if you're running a web server and it stops running, it probably means it crashed, right? And you don't want that. You want it to restart. So what we're doing here is we're saying, actually, for this service, once you've run, you can stop. Okay, so it's run once, doesn't run again. Okay, I can restart it and it'll run, but then it'll stop. But nothing will try and restart it. And the environment here, I'm hard coding it because we're going to do local mode, but we talked earlier about service environment variables and device environment variables. This would classify itself as a service environment variable. So this process, when it runs, is going to define that can 0 bit rate value in its environment. So if you've ever been at like a bash prompt and you run env and it gives you all your environment variables, in effect, if I jump into this service and I run env, and I'll do it to show you, you'll see that value. Okay? It's the environment that it's running in. The can dump one is a bit simpler. We don't need to pass him anything. He's not going to be making the network go up and down, but he does need access to that network interface. So he runs in host mode, and we build can dump. Okay, so it's very simple. It's multiple services. So this is where, when we showed the different application types, we have multi-service. That's what this would need. So we'll look at can init. Nice and straightforward. We have a Docker file and an entry point. Don't worry about that one for now, but we'll take a look at the Docker file. This is a recipe. That's the nice. So if you imagine you're cooking a new omelette, and you want the same omelette as me, we'd better use the same recipe, right? And that's how Docker files are working. They define the steps that are going to be undertaken. Apologies to those who do understand Docker already. Just 5 minutes, and we'll be back to other stuff. So the from bit at the top is where we're going to start from. So all Docker files, if you go back through that, you can think of that as like an inheritance tree. So if we went and looked at the Docker file for the Balena lib generic arm v7, whatever it is, then you'd find it would have a from, and then the next one behind it would have a from, and you could keep going all the way back until you got to one that started from scratch, which is empty. Okay. So all this is doing is a bit like in programming, it's like extends, brings in that image, starts there, and then starts running this recipe. So a bit like if we had a base omelette, and then we wanted to have like a fruit omelette. I mean, who'd have one of those? But yeah, you'd have from base omelette, add apples, yeah? And then at the end you'd be sick. But either way, like, that's how you do it. And that's what this is doing. We then have different terms that are down the side. So run, copy, work directory, entry point. And these are the recipe elements. So we're going to take this image, we're going to start it, and we're going to run this command in it. So it's going to run apt update. It's going to install IP root 2 and the can utils because we need those to configure the device. And then we're going to delete the apt cache afterwards. Nice thing with Docker images is it's a good practice to try and only ship what you actually need. So I could leave those in there, and it's not going to have a negative impact to its operation, but it's going to make that image size bigger. So like, why ship stuff I don't need? Yeah, if I'm going to download this on my 3G connection, I'd rather make that as small as possible. We're copying the entry point script that we had. We're going to take a little look at that as well, and then we're going to make it executable. You'll then notice that it uses that entry point script as its entry point, and then we have a command of true. The way this bit works, there's some semantics around it. You can think of the entry point as the thing that is always going to happen, and then the command is variable. So if I don't provide a command, so if I say like docker run this image that I'm going to produce, and just leave it as that, then it will run the entry point, but it will pass in the value that's in command as an argument into that script, like in a bash argument. If I said docker run and this image and then bash, then it's going to pass bash into the entry point script, but it's always going to run an entry point. Okay, that's quite important when you start building these services, but it's something that you would have to like get used to understanding before it made total sense.
It's also worth noting that the behaviour changes massively depending on if you've passed a list or a string to entry point and command. So look at the documentation if you are going to do that, because it will trip you up.
Yeah. So the meat and potatoes of this whole service is configuring this interface. That's why it's the init. So we've made a nice bash script here. For those who've never seen bash, it's just a list of shell commands in effect. They're going to get executed. So we take in the can 0 bitrate from the environment, and if it doesn't exist, we have a default value of 10,000. So we're kind of covering ourselves off here in case we don't provide something, but we are going to provide something, so we're fine. So in our case, we had that set to 500,000, so that's what the value would be here. We're then going to echo out setting the value, and then we'll put the value in. We then drop the interface down, we bring the interface back up, we set the bit rate when we do it to the one we want, and then we say starting, and we execute the parameter that was passed into us. So in our case, that was true. So it then pretty much says true and then exits. Okay? And that's our service done. It's done its job. And then the can dump one is very similar. I'm not going to go through too much on it, but there's just a Docker file for this one. So it does the same thing in as much that it takes the same base image, pulls in a can utils. Now I did think about making them inherit from each other, because I could have done that. That would have kept those layers the same. I felt it might confuse the demo, so I just kept it this way. But there are ways to optimize and make things like that better. This one doesn't have an entry point script because the base image contains one, so I don't need to provide one because I'm not going to do anything special. But I do want to run the can dump command on this can 0 interface. Okay. So what we're going to do is I'm going to switch back.
Anyone that is familiar with Docker files and was wondering then how is that going to work on the different platforms you mentioned, you'll notice maybe that it said on v7 in the parent image. You can templatize them, yeah. And then Belena will unravel certain variables, so you can have a variabilized from effectively.
So I know the IP address of my device. Okay, so let me just get this right. I'm going to check out the hardware stage. So I should have now. So I've got this repo that we just looked at. I've got it into this directory on my machine. I can see I've got all the same files and everything else that we just looked at. I want to test this works, okay? But I'm not going to push it to the cloud and then have the device pull it down from the cloud. I want to actually test it right now, okay? So we're going to do, part of our development flow is with a development image on this device, we can go into local mode. And what that does is it keeps the device attached to the application, but it detaches it from trying to follow what that application is doing in the cloud, yeah? So it keeps it manageable, but it's not pulling software from the cloud anymore. It just makes it run as a sort of standalone device. Okay. So I'm going to drop this device. I can do it from here. I can just enable local mode. So what that will now do is the UI should change. Say local mode. When it's in local mode, you don't get the service information because it no longer adheres to what the application in the cloud might want it to do. It's just, you can think of it as becoming purely for testing and building stuff. That should do what it needs to do. I need that IP address. And then what I'm going to do is from here, I'm going to run Balena. So the Balena CLI I'm going to be using. This is a tool. If you search, go on our homepage, there'll be links to all this stuff. But Balena CLI is our tool set that we use for interacting with the devices and pushing code to the cloud. So I'm trying to think of a comparable thing. Like I think Heroku has something similar, and most of these cloud-based services out there have their own tool set, like the AWS CLI. It's akin to that. So it's our interface to the devices and our infrastructure. So first of all, I need to log in. Helps when you type it properly. So I'll just use the web authorization because that's nice and easy. I'm already logged in the thing, so it's going to have done that step for me. I'm just going to authorize, and that can be closed. And then now so I'm in. I should be able to do things like Balena devices. So it's not quite, sorry about the width of the screen, but you can see there we have an ID for the device, the UUID. I can see if it is idle. So it's not doing anything at the moment. It's online, the software versions. If you use Open Balena, then these tools are the same. So it's again, we've got that parity between all of our different parts of the ecosystem. And what I'm going to do is, I'm not sure on the name of the app, so I'll run Balena apps. Vehicle control, I thought it was. So I don't think I need that right now, but I do want to run this code. So I'm going to say Balena push and the IP address of the device. Now, if I did Balena push vehicle control, it would take all of this, it would bundle up that sort of file system, Docker files, and the different services. It would push it up to our builders. We would identify the type of device we're building for. We compile it all in that context, so it would build those images for an ARM board, and it would put them into our registry, ready for that device to download. Okay, that's the managed flow. In local mode, if I pass it Balena push and then the IP address of the device, what you'll see is it actually does this on the device. So this Pi is now going off and pulling those images, and then it's going to start doing all of the build steps, going through that recipe. And when it's finished building them, it will start running them, and then the logs will come out the back of it. Okay. Now, when this runs, it's going to throw errors. I know this is going to happen because one, I haven't got the hardware connected, and two, I haven't told it how to configure the interface. Okay, which we talked about. This is the part where the demo speeds up because now we all know what we're talking about. We should be good.
Making that assumption. Are there any questions at the minute?
Yeah.
No, good. You all know what you're talking about.
So what I'll do is I'll try and point out some of this stuff because it gets a little bit mixed. So you see on the left you've got the name of the two services. Yeah, those are the names that came from that services definition in the compose file. This is the output from the build step. So at certain points, like you'll see this just looks like standard apt pulling in packages because it is outputting the same as it would. What you'll see is with these lines with arrows and then a hash mark, step 3 of 9, step 4 of 5, these are from that recipe. So where we had those terms run and copy and all this, that's where they're being driven from, okay? Some of the last things it does is the labels. So it's done the build, it's now running them. And then we tag the labels. So can dump outputted that. Okay, and we can filter those down in the log, and we'll do that later to make it a bit cleaner. But what we can see there is that it built fine, it's now running, but there's obviously an issue with it, okay, because the hardware is not configured. Okay.
And the can dump service is restarting because it wasn't configured not to.
It can't find the can 0 interface because it doesn't know it should have a can 0 interface.
Yeah, if you the repositories you connect to pull images down from, if you needed credentials to pull them.
There's an argument for the Balena push command. You can push up some credentials for your Docker repository.
There's like a JSON format. It's detailed in our docs that you can provide. So if your images are in a private repo, then you can do that. Yeah. So what I want from here is that going to switch me back to there? No, we're good. So we can see in here for the requirements that we need to have a DT overlay for this device. So what we're going to do is just minimize that down. To here, device configuration. And we need to add, actually no, sorry. I'm going to do this for the fleet. Every device in this fleet is going to do the same, is going to run the same application, so therefore I want everyone to have this configuration parameter. So when I add another Raspberry Pi, I don't want to have to go and do this again. I want this just done every time. So, custom configuration. We need one of those, and we need the value. Do you know what I love? We used to have this size monitor as a standard size monitor.
Showing your age there, mate.
Huh?
Showing your age there.
I know, I'm showing my age. So, what I want is... Come on. Where's it gone? That one. So, I'll paste this in. So these values are specific to this hardware. Okay, it's not something that's Balena related or demo related. It's this MCP 2515 CAN transceiver. It already has like hardware alignment with the default Raspberry Pi kernel, which we use in our Yocto builds. So this DT overlay is already in there. What I'm telling it is that I want you to enable it. So the pins are configured for it. I'm giving it some parameters for the oscillator that's on the board. Again, these aren't necessarily anything you would have to do unless you were using this board, but that's why they're there for. And normally what you would do is this, is you'd pull the memory card out of this Pi, you'd put it into your machine, you'd mount the boot image, go and find the config text, and then add this into the config text, okay? And you'd do that for every single Pi that you ever distributed, okay? I don't want to do that, I'm going to just do it here, and then it should. Okay, that will be there. Now what will happen is the supervisor will get told, and it may not get told now because I'm in local mode, I need to check that, but the supervisor will get told that its configuration parameters have changed. So what it should do is pull that value, see that it's different, recognize the difference, apply it, and then reboot to actually take the apply of that configuration value. Now because I am in local mode, it may not have done that. It did because it's gone offline, so brilliant. Normally, the reason I say that is that normally you could jump into here and you would actually see in the logs that it would log that output that that's happened, and therefore you'd be able to see it and do it. So
it's probably logged to your console.
I don't think it did because I thought did I terminate the.
If you've terminated your push, you won't have done them with it.
Oh no, there we go. We're there. Look, applying boot config. So yeah, good shot, man. Didn't think of that. So yeah, we can see there that it happened. So it applied the boot config because it detected there was changes. So let's say, for example, the hardware manufacturer gave you these settings for, you've had a custom hat built, they've told you what you need and everything else, but all of a sudden they realise, oh, sorry, we've shipped you a load with 8 megahertz crystals instead of 16, so that value that you've set them all to 16 megahertz, you need to now change them all to 8, and you've just done 1,000 of them over a massive weekend push. That would be a problem, whereas it wouldn't be a problem here. We could just change it on the back end and they'd all just pick it up and then they'd start working. So, device connection will be lost. That's normal because it rebooted, but I think it should get the same IP address. Yeah, it will. The build, you'll just notice, went really fast. You see there it says using cache. Yeah. So the way that Docker works is if nothing has changed, then it's already built that layer. So if I don't go and change that line, then the output should be the same. So it caches it. So that's fine. So again, we're still getting some errors, kind of to be expected since it's not on the board. Yep.
If the reboot fails, can you unwind the push that you've done? Does it automatically unwind the push and reboot back?
You mean if you made a change that caused it to not boot?
Yes, so it sort of applied the change and restarted and it doesn't come back up. Is there a 2-3 attempt then when I roll back to a previously known configuration?
I'm not aware that there is. But I'm trying to think so the parameters are sanity checked. So if you tried to say like DT param instead of DT params, then we would say, well, we don't recognize that for what you're trying to do, so that bit wouldn't apply. It's an interesting question. I don't think we do anything to that level, but I'll try and find out for you if you want.
I'm pretty sure we don't.
You know, I think the problem with that as an idea is that you'd have to get so far into it to make the decision that it hadn't worked. So I think that would require like a change to maybe the bootloader or something like that for it to acknowledge that it was never getting that far. And as far as I'm aware, I don't think we make that kind of change to the bootloader. I know that we do have some changes in the bootloaders, but I don't think we make changes to that level. It's an interesting idea though, so I'll feed that back to our product teams just to get for my own purposes, if nothing else. So I've just connected the actual hardware because it wasn't connected, which makes sense, but that's all good. I'll actually connect it to the car. Not that it will make any difference because the car is not powered on. It's an EV, by the way, just in case anybody. The new fire engines are all electric. So I did it so no one could accuse me of tampering and sending commands via the serial port. So those on the front row will confirm to you that that is just a power bank connected to the truck. So we'll do it again. Hopefully it's come back online. Yeah, I didn't think it might not have done. There we go. Okay, so we have some results. CanDump is running the service. The log, CanDump, when it receives CAN frames, it just dumps it out. So it's a bit like TCP dump or something like that for those of you that know that. So we can see we're getting CAN frames coming out of the back of this truck. Not that it matters much for the demo, but you've got two different addresses in there, 01 and 002. 001 has got 3 bytes to it, and 002 has got 1 byte. I won't pull up the spec sheet for the car because I didn't bother writing one. But what I will tell you is that 001 as an address controls all the lights on the fire truck and represents their state, and 02 is the sirens. So at the moment they're all set to 0. So it's a little bit boring, but that's what they're for. So we've successfully written some software and we've pushed it to a Raspberry Pi and we've confirmed that we can communicate with our vehicle. So part of our prototype to product is like, we've been successful in this now, we're there. We haven't fulfilled the requirement of having a web interface for it though. So I think that's what we've got to tackle next, is actually getting some software that can communicate with this and move it forward. So I'm going to drop back out of that. I'm going to check out stage 3 and take a quick look in this directory. So we've still got CanDump, we've still got CAN in it, we've got Docker Compose, but we've got this new directory now, the web API. I can tell you for all certainty that the first 3 bits never changed. The only thing we'll have changed is the Docker Compose, and we'll take a look at that now. For bonus points for those in the room who want to answer a question, what do you think changed in the Docker Compose file? Yeah, we had to add it somewhere, and that's where it will have gone. So,
I really wanted those bonus points.
Add them up, mate. That's your job. You've got to keep track of them. Yeah, gold handshake. Handshake. Yeah, the more bonus points, the longer the handshake.
You can have 2 stickers as well instead of just 1.
Yeah, you get to pick the stickers first, even. Not even that. So, yeah, absolutely right. The Docker Compose file. So this bit is the same as we had before. So we still need to initialize the hardware. We still want to dump the CAN frames because we're building this up and we want to make sure that it's still there. But we do also need this web API service. And interestingly enough, it's also very straightforward, the same as the CanDump. So we're just telling it that we want it to run. The restart we don't need to define. It restarts always anyway. That's its default position. Again, we need the network mode to be host because we're talking directly to the CAN network interface, and that is a host-bound interface. If you were just doing something that didn't need you to actually directly communicate with a physical host network interface, you would drop that out there. You wouldn't need that, and it runs inside its own natted thing. So that's just very specific to what we're dealing with. It's not typical of every single thing you would need to do. The web API is, have we got any JavaScript developers in the room? Yeah? Good. This is an Express app with a socket IO front end on it. Living the dream. We've got a Docker file, so we'll take a look at that. That's probably the most relevant. Again, we've used one of our Balenalib base images. There's a number of reasons why you would want to use our base images. Primarily, as Will said, if you look in the name, they're focused on hardware. So It doesn't use a manifest or anything like that. Like, this will only work on an ARM v7HF. There are ways to, if you're writing an application that is going to go onto, say, Intel boards and ARM boards, they wouldn't be able to be in the same application, but you can template this so that you can say, oh, I want the architectural type to go in there, and then depending on which application you push it to, we substitute it in the cloud backend, so you get the right image for your hardware. I didn't need to in this instance, so I didn't. I didn't want to confuse it, but for anyone who is doing that, it's possible. So we set the work directory. That's kind of just like CDing. It's where you want all this stuff to go. We're copying in your package JSONs, the usual JavaScript developer-y stuff. We're installing our dependencies, and then we're actually doing another image. Okay, so this is what we would term as a multi-stage build. So we're using one image to build the software, and another image to run it. So the last from in the list will be the one that it spits out as its artifact from this stage. The reason for this is because, again, we talked earlier about size. Like, we don't want to be pushing loads of data over a 3G connection, for example. So the build stage is going to need things like GYP and make and all kinds of system level stuff to build the node modules, because it turns out the library we're using to talk to the CAN module is actually written in C. It's not written in JavaScript. It gets linked into JavaScript, but it's a C thing. But we don't need that when we're running it. We only just need that to build it. So what we're doing is we're taking, you can see that step here, so we copy from the builder, and that is this image as builder. So we're copying from that image into this image, and then we bring in the source code that isn't going to change because it's TypeScript. We expose port 80, because that's the one we're going to listen on. So we're telling the Balena engine that this should expect ports on port 80. And then our command is an npm start, and that will start the service. So what I'm going to do is switch back to the terminal here. Funnily enough, since we're going to be on, I think we're still in local mode, I'm just going to push it again. So those can init and can dumps, they haven't changed. So they shouldn't need to really be built. So we can see in there that the cache has all been used. Further up this list, which is why it should be sat there, we've got a blue one. I know it's not very easy to read on the wall. That's just Web API, so you can see it's just coloured and label. This is pulling down the Balena lib build image. So it's going to take some time just to pull that in, and it's going through the same step where it's going to be pull it in, build it, and then spit out an image, and then run. Okay. While this does it, does anybody have a question? Go for it.
So I think you're using command for connections nowadays. Are you?
No.
Not as far as I'm aware.
Really? What I was wondering about was if you've got multiple different ways of connecting out from a device, so wired, wireless, cellular.
Okay.
How do you got a way of prioritizing between them, choosing between them?
So we use Network Manager.
Right.
I believe the Network Manager configs can contain metric on routes and things like that, so you can change it around. It's not something I've ever personally done, but I can't see why it would be an issue to do that, since you can use Network Manager to do it. The other option, we have got some people who will build a service that uses dbus to talk to Network Manager. So they'll boot their sort of device up, and one of their services, a bit like my can init service, they'll have it run commands against the host's Network Manager, and so they can configure stuff from there. We've got people doing some really funky things with things like that. It can cause a nightmare to support, but yeah, you can get quite clever with it. But for your specific case there about prioritizing on interfaces, I don't imagine it would be an issue. I've never done it, so I can't say concretely yes, but I can't really see why it should be a problem. One to try, I suppose.
On the Resident Goose partition,
Yeah.
you can change things like the splash image and
Yeah.
things like that. And there's loads of other things you can change with the network configuration and stuff.
Yeah, the system connections.
Yeah, that's where you...
Yeah, and system connections which has network manager in it and that sort of stuff as well. But my question is, how can I fix that sort of thing over the air? But because you kind of need to take that out and manually modify those things.
That
Okay.
depends on which thing. Some of the things, there's a configuration option for on the dashboard, and that will actually go back into your config file. Some things like your system connections, I think you're stuck with just taking the SD card out again.
Nope.
Nope. Rich is saying Rich.
System connections, you can. So if you we will do this because part of what we want to do is configure the 3G modem, and so that will need a system connections file. You can do it to the image directly. You don't need to sort of, because like let's say with a fin, you can't take anything out, right? So you've got to pre-configure the image before you put it on. So if you were doing something like that, then you would pre-configure it with your system connection file. If you wanted to change one that was running, then you would need to have access to it for a start off. So if it's that, I don't know, you've shipped it and it's connected to O2 and you move into EE, then as long as it's still got a network connection, then if you drop a file into you can go in via SSH and write to the mount boot sysconnections. Then next time it reboots, it'll copy anything from that directory into the a persistent one. Yeah, and then it would have it.
Playing around and that sort of thing, everything was read-only, so I just thought it was true.
Yeah. No, there is, for everything that's read-only, if it's meant to be changed, there is normally a way to change it. There's discussions internally, we have internal projects set up for this particular fact about how we're going to pre-configure images and how we let people do it, where we let people do it. You know, we've had discussions whether we want to do it where you can provide them at the dashboard and get it injected into the image and all kinds of stuff like that. Like, we're always thinking about how can we make this better for the user. Again, with the mantra of reducing friction, like you've got some friction there, how can we make our tools make it so you don't have that friction? If you have things like that, I'm not sure the way to do it off the top of my head right now, but we should have a way for you to feed that back to us. Even if you can go through the forums, but I think there's probably that we should have other ways to do it more formally.
There are a bunch of outstanding articles and that sort of thing, and the resolution usually is take the SD card out, but I suspect that there's loads of ways to do it that just aren't kind of official or
we tend to operate in a way where we don't want to have work having to be done more than once. So there's no point in me making a system that relies on you taking an SD card out, because what if the device doesn't have an SD card? I need to find a way to make it easier for you that is more ubiquitous and that we can use across.
Just picking up on that point, when we were talking about the process of loading SD card, some of the devices have the eMMC, don't they? You've got this two-phase process, which is quite interesting.
So the fin uses eMMC. So you'll see later when we flash the fin, you have to connect it and it goes into this flashing mode where we then treat it as like a block device and we write to it that way. There are other devices with eMMC, but how you get to write to those, I guess, is up to that implementation. I don't know if they come with an adapter that you can drop them in and they become like a USB device. But for me, I think, and certainly, when I'm dealing with these things, I like to look at it that if I'm going to do this, I need to look at it on scale. So I'd want to pre-configure these files into the image, and I'd just have one image then that I provide as a master to the fulfillment company or the warehouse and say, you put this on my devices. That's how you do it en masse. So yeah.
Just one more thing here. So you're saying you don't want to repeat where? I have to do that in one instance, which is where, and I don't know if this has anything to supervise it, basically. When you specify dash platform equals ARM/v7 in your build file, that'll make it not buildable locally, but it can be built on the cloud. So just because of the way that it handles manifests different than a local builder versus the remote builder. Is that?
So if you're doing that in terms, so if you run OpenBlender, for example, then you don't have a cloud builder, but you can still build images for ARM on your x86 machine. So we offer the petty to emulate a build. There's a really interesting blog post from a couple of 3 years, something like that back now. Our CTO, Petros, is a genius man. He's only a young fella, but he's a really smart cookie, and he worked out how you can effectively run the system. Any command in the Docker file goes through Qemu, so you emulate being an ARM platform. So effectively you can build ARM-based images on a normal desktop machine. Interestingly enough, I believe it's actually the same way that Docker did it recently. They announced that you could do this in one of their announcements. Last year, was it?
Yeah, Docker for Mac doesn't it use this static command.
But they used the same mechanism. So it was interesting to see, but so you can do that. You can emulate those builds. So, for example, I could still build those for OpenBlender locally on my machine, even though I've told them that they'll be for ARM. Because Docker won't care about that. It will pull in the image and it just goes to operate on it. And it's at that point that it needs to be able to emulate. And that's what we can handle in our emulated build process.
What I was trying to say though is that when you specify some things in the Docker file, the the local builder that you're doing right now to push to the Raspberry Pi, the local builder that's building on the Pi itself, and the build that's happening on your local machine on the QEMU, all the remote cloud builds, they all operate a bit differently in a way that I found myself in a situation where I can only use the cloud builder and I can't use the local builder.
Okay.
I can't use the QEMU builder.
So you're passing from dash platform in your Docker file.
Yeah.
We should probably look into that, to be honest.
Yeah. Reach out to me on that one, because I'd like to know the difference.
You've probably found the bug, in reality there, I think.
I mean, to put it into perspective for you, like the cloud builders are ARM64 machines, so they are natively ARM, but we have to like knock them down in effect when we tell it to do a build, to say build for an ARM32. But it's still ARM. When you go and you push like an Intel NUC image to the cloud, we know it's not going to work on the ARM images, so we send it to Intel-based build platforms. The emulated builds can have trouble with things like Rust because of the LLVM and the way that it does compiling. Sometimes it relies on things that don't emulate particularly well, and that can sometimes cause a trouble. But yeah, reach out. I would say on this case, probably go to the forums and put it on there. Like, you should be able to @Rich Bayliss on there. Like, my handle's the same for everything. So if you want, just ping me into it, and then I'll make sure that everybody gets a look at what we need to do. Because that's, for us, that's an important factor. You know, do it now if you want. You'll miss this bit though, and it'll be really good. So again, while we were chatting, the software's built and is pushed. What I should be able to do is, using that same IP address. Ooh.
So if anyone else can remember the IP address, you can do it before him if you want now.
Yeah, you can actually, because I can't remember it. I really should.
10.1.
10.0, mate.
10.0, 3681. I think. Yeah,
there it is.
Do you believe the scan will find more than just that device on the network?
That's,
you say that. We sat there for an hour trying to get Balena scan to work before we did this, and that's why we're typing IP addresses now.
So I didn't Balena scan. Oh, all right. So someone found it. So if anybody wants to know how the Node JS code works underneath this, then I can show you if you want. It's probably be a bit boring for the rest of everybody else, but essentially what we have is a front end and a back end. Whenever the back end sees one of those CAN messages, it knows how to understand the byte patterns that are in there. If it sees that the state has changed on the vehicle, it transmits it to the front end. The front end represents it in those series of radio buttons. And conversely, if I change a radio button, then it changes the state on the web server, and it then sees that they're different and sends a CAN update message to the truck. Okay? So as per our brief, we have a web application that we can now control the vehicle. So for those who can't see, I'm not sure who's doing it, but someone's doing it. There you go. So the lights are on. Actually, whoever's doing it, can you like tell me what you're changing, and then people can at least see. So someone put the hazards on. There you go.
Trackballs, there you
go. So yeah, we can see that that's working. And despite these cables, if anyone wants to come and inspect them with a scope, there is no serial port to my PC. This is actually happening over thing. Okay, so in essence, what we've done there is we've fully prototyped exactly what it is that we need, okay? But we're not really cloud connected at this point. So the software's just been pushed from my laptop to there. It's not really ready to go, is it? So what we need to now do is drop this device out of local mode and get this software up into the cloud so it can be updated, okay? But before I do that, I missed a very vital step then. I'm not very happy with the fact that it says vehicle control, so I want to change it, okay? Now, if you remember how those builds happened, we had to tell it to go and build, and it would go and pull in the layers and everything else, okay? And if any of those layers change, then it has to kind of lose its cache from that point. So, for example, that would then slow down, like I'd have to keep doing the push command and everything else. What we've done is we've developed something called live push. So, I'm going to very quickly, first of all, I'll have to turn the feature off first. I can remember how to do it. Nah, that's not it, we'll go for it, we're fine. So what will happen is the Balena push command will detect when the file system changes, and then what it will do is it will invalidate the image on the device, and it will push in the changes and restart the image, okay? So if, for example, I wanted to go to the HTML for this little page, and I change, where's it gone?
Looking for your type.
Vehicle control. I want it to say demo. and I'll quickly switch back. You'll see detected changes for container. It's going to restart service. It drops it. It restarts it. Service restarting.
Restarted.
Express takes a minute or so, a couple of seconds to just do its thing. There you go, ready. So now if I just go back to the web page as it was, that one. I don't have a quick reload on the HTML, but I'll just reload the app and it will say down. So we've just made changes in real time there. Like when I was developing this, I had to work out how I was going to do all the different radios and everything else. And that's how I did it. I was making changes in the background. It was updating for me as I went, and I could just quickly check and see what it was doing. So we can rapidly prototype the software in order to get this to where we want it to be. I could make more changes, but I think rather than kind of bore you with how software works, I think we get the point. As a developer, that's really good for me, because it means I can get stuff out faster. I can see those changes.
We actually build the Balena backend components using a copy of Balena, running on Balena, using live push to update it. It's still turtles all the way down.
So Balena Cloud is obviously an x86 targeted software stack, but it also runs as a Docker stack. And so what we do is we have a little Intel NUC as our development box. We have that running a Balena OS application attached to a cloud entity. We have them in local mode. We pull down our software stack from our Git repo, and we Balena push to our NUC, which is how we run all of our Balena Cloud stack when we're developing Balena Cloud. So we develop Balena on Balena. I was talking about this earlier with someone about they run a lot of their back-end stuff in like Ubuntu with Docker on it, and I was saying, why not run Balena OS and run your stuff on that? And it's a bit of a mind, but yeah, you can. That's how we do it. The ultimate dog food. So what I'm going to do now is I'm going to drop this device. Oh, not that way. Where's it gone? Too many windows. It's that one. Okay. So what I'm going to do now is I'm going to put this device back into sort of managed mode, okay? So it's going to stop running the software, okay? Essentially, it's going to forget about all that work that we just did, and it's going back into, I'm managed by the cloud. What software should I be running? None, because we haven't pushed any. So I think we should, so we can see there it's applying the configuration to drop it into local mode. What I'm going to do now is I'm going to push it to vehicle demo.
Technical vehicle control.
Oh, it was. There we go. As you can see, we don't let you push to other people's applications that might be called something similar to yours. Yeah, it was vehicle control. So what we're going to see now is it's going to upload the source packages to our cloud builders. You can see in there it's building on ARM03. That's one of our ARM-based builders. It's going to go through all the same steps, but it should be much faster because it's in the cloud. And it will get pushed to, where's it gone? The releases. So we can see here we've got a release that's running. So we talked earlier about how this would look a bit like a CI system if that's what you're used to. We can see the Docker Compose that we pushed. We can see the build logs when they come in. So at the moment it's still processing them because they're still being built. Actually, I'm going to, if I duplicate this tab, I can keep an eye on the device at the same time. And you'll see what happens to this. So, what I'm going to expect to see is, and to talk you through the process, that build is going to get done in the cloud and it will get uploaded to the registry. And then a message will be sent to this, to our API to say that anything in this application, we've just made a new release. And because this device is set to track the application's release, it's going to go, well, I'm not running that release, so I'm going to start pulling it in. Okay, so this is a, like over-the-air update, you can think of this. So I know that I'm connected in the same network as this, but if this was sat in, I don't know, France, this process would still work. There's no local connection now between these two. Let's just see what the, oh, nicely timed. So we can see here the images have all successfully completed. We've got image sizes that are around about 100 to 200 meg. Again, if we were to keep the build size images here, it would be quite significant, and we want to try and reduce that. I know that storage is cheap these days, but every bit counts. The unicorn means thumbs up, it was all good. And then it should, when it's finished doing its thing, we'll get dropped back to the prompt. I just want to see what's going on over here. Still running. Oh, there we go. Build succeeded. You can see it was a cloud build. So you can actually build locally and push the images up and they'll get applied as well if you want them to, but this was built on the cloud. It's not running on any devices as yet. So if you've got multiple releases, you can actually see how many are running, whichever one you want. We can look at the build logs for, say, this one. So this is what we saw happening in the thing. So you've got a reference to that later on if you need to see it. We use this for things like if a customer comes to us and says, oh, I've just done a new build and this all of a sudden doesn't work, and we can normally compare those logs and see like if they made a change somewhere. Okay, so it's still not pulled them in yet, but it should do soon. It's hard to tell with the screen being so small. Is there any questions at this point while we just wait for it to do its thing?
I've typed you in an issue on GitHub.
Lovely. PR's welcome, and standard response.
You get another type of animal that doesn't work.
Huh?
You got a unicorn, does it work? What do you get? It doesn't work.
You just don't get anything, yeah, you just get an error message. Sometimes you get like, there is like a festive one, so you get the different one at Christmas and a different, yeah.
October, I think Halloween as well was...
So we can see on here that the device has got a target release. So we are telling it should be running that version. So it has updated in as much that it thinks it knows what it should be running, but it's not currently running it.
There we go. Oh no, you were scrolling.
No, this is when it dropped out.
It's normally much faster than this, promise.
Yeah, it is normally much faster than this. I feel a bit embarrassed that it's not doing it. I think it's probably a combination of the fact that we dropped out of local mode and then did it straight away, but that's unusual.
The development energy.
I would say we should just use newer software because we're on 238, but...
I've got another question.
Go for it.
Yeah, keep them coming.
The Lena Fin, it says 8 gigabytes on the back. Is that RAM or is that...
That's storage. We do 8, 16 and 32?
Yeah, it's the onboard eMMC. So with the Fin, it uses the compute module and it comes in a light variant, which has got no eMMC. So that makes the compute module cheaper to buy. And then the eMMC is on the Fin. So it's an 8 gig version of eMMC on the Fin.
Has it got any PCI Express as well?
It has. The lanes that are exposed on it, although it's a mini PCI Express connector, there's no PCI bus on it. It's USB and the ones that you need for a modem to do the SIM. So yeah, if in doubt, reboot the device. So yeah, in effect, we've got to wait for that to reboot and do its thing.
So the Type 4 has the ability to use the PCI Express runs on it. Is there a Lena Fin with the...
There isn't a compute module for the Pi 4.
Oh, I was just wondering if like...
So yeah, I mean, if they make a compute module for the Pi 4, then I imagine that's something we would look to factor into it. I think I mean, I can't speak for the Raspberry Pi Foundation. The whole target with the compute module was for like industrial future proofing. So you would have one format. So if you look at the first editions of the compute module, they haven't really changed pinout wise as they've gone along because they want you to be able to replace them in. I think if they were going to start exposing the PCI bus on that connector, I don't know if they've got enough pins left on it. I'm not sure, but they would have to keep it pin compatible, or they would certainly want to, I would imagine. So whether you'd be able to make a Fin, V3 that came with, those on there, can't say. But I imagine, we would look to do whatever the market wanted us to do. I'll let someone else answer that question.
So the Fin is a kind of a way for Raspberry Pi users to transition to industrial.
Yeah.
Are there plans for other custom versions of the Fin?
So you mean like a custom hardware BOM on a Fin? I don't want to get the answer wrong. I believe the answer to that is yes. So you can order like a stripped down Fin. I don't think it's the kind of thing you can just go on the website and say, I'll have one of those, please. But yeah, I mean, certainly if you wanted to order some that were customized, then of course, yeah. I'm trying to think, like there's an example because if you look on the Fin, there's an RGB LED and things like that. Now you might not want that, and if you're ordering 100,000 of them and they cost 10p, then that's a significant cost. If you can remove them, then it can be there. The same with like the display head connectors and all that kind of stuff. If you're just not using it, you might want to drop it off. then yeah, I believe we do. There's certainly an opportunity to discuss that. That's about as much as I know about it, so I can't really say more, but yeah, if that was something you wanted to do, then definitely get in touch. So I'm assuming at this point now, yeah, something must be running since that's making squeaky noises. So we can see that the dashboard slightly changed now. So we have a current release. We can see that it's running the software that we pushed. We already knew it was going to work because we tested it, so that was nice. And the messages are now logged to the cloud. So before they were coming back to my command prompt, which is where I pushed from, whereas now I could see this in real time anywhere. So if I pick this setup now, say, right, here we go, take your Raspberry Pi off to where this is in Gloucester, plug it into the fire engine with all the lights on it, then it would just start popped up on here and it would work. Okay, assuming they'd connected it to an Ethernet connector, so we should get round to solving that. So I'm going to jump back to my code. So is everybody happy with what we've just done? Does everybody understand the difference between that local development and what we are now at, which is where this device is cloud managed and is running that software from the cloud? So it's pulled in its images from the cloud and it's running them from there. So there's no direct link between my machine. So, okay, I better it'll moan if I don't do that, I'm sure. So git checkout, stage 4.
Spelled that wrong, mate.
Spelled that wrong. That's no good. Cellular. Right. So we're kind of there now. Last thing we want to do is get this thing working on a cellular connection before we then transport the whole thing over to a fin. So in order to do that, what I'm going to need to do is, again, find the right window, because it's never easy, is it? That one. So to do this, we talked about it a minute ago, which is the system connection files. So what I've got here is there's a support file. This is, for anyone who's used Network Manager before, this will be instantly recognizable. So this is just how you can tell Network Manager how to use a GSM network. So I'm going to be using giffgaff, so there's my APN. This would be, you configure this with whatever your network is. The 3G modem is just a Huawei, so you can go and buy these off the shelf, they're dirt cheap. Again, keeping that development cost low, but at the same time, it's something we could take to production. And if you get a Huawei, you can order 10,000 of these without any issues. You can even get the same chipset and everything else in a mini PCI, which is what you probably would do if you were going on the fin, drop it in the bottom, even better. So what we need to do is we need to get this connection file into the image, yeah, that we made, that we pulled down, because there's no way I want to be pulling an SD card out of this when it's a fin, so I might as well use the tools that we have available right now. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to flick, leave it where it is. I'm going to open. Now I'd like to say that I'm such a Linux super guru that I could do this with the terminal prompt, but you know what? It's late at night. So this is the image that we pulled, and it's zipped up, okay? So I'm just going to extract it onto here, because in order to work with the image, you need it as an image. So the CLI tools can only work with the image. What we're going to do is we're going to use the same Balena CLI command that we use to push, so it's like one tool that you're using all the time. We're going to use that tool, we're going to configure this image to, we're going to keep it pointing to the same application. We're not going to put Wi-Fi into it, but I am going to add that system connection file into the image and then I'm going to burn that image to the SD card, okay? I'm not going to do, as we talked earlier about, burn the image and then remount it and then copy a file in, because that's not repeatable in a warehouse factory scenario. So I've got the image there, which is Balena Cloud, blah, 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 as it was. Don't need to worry about that. So we'll keep it in here. We'll just check that we do have the support files, giffgaff. We do, this is good. So I'm going to run Balena OS configure. It should let me do that, it does. So our help system on the CLI is actually pretty good. So if ever you want to know how to do something, it just like we offer the dash help, and there's also a verbose and everything else to really kind of give you stuff. The docs online are also pretty comprehensive for it, so you should be okay. So this command allows us to pass an image that we want. We can specify, you can actually specify the device that it should become when it goes online. We're not going to do that. We're just going to configure it to point to our application, and we're going to pass in configure this one here, the system connection file. Okay, I'm not going to configure it for Wi-Fi. I'm not going to do any other stuff with it. I just want to simply put that file in the image. So I want to take the downloads Balena cloud control image. So that's my image file. It's -- app. You know what? Trying to type with your head sideways is pretty tough. Vehicle control. And then I want this system connection. So system connection file that I want to add. And you can add this command multiple times. So if you've got to add like 4 different GSM connections because you're going to be using different networks in different places, like you could do this. I want to take the support files. I'm just going to go with what I know. Support files, GIFGAF. So we just leave it as Ethernet, which is, we're actually talking about how we're going to revise some of this, these stages. So that image now should have been rewritten. Okay. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to take the device offline. I'm going to yank the Ethernet cable out of it because we want this to work first time. I'm going to take the memory card out. I'm going to get that right in. Now there's also a command that you can do, and we'll look at this a bit later on as well, is where you preload. Actually no, I want to preload it first. Sorry. Put it back in the thing. When we go to the 3G, if I was to put that into the Pi, it wouldn't have the application on it. So it's going to download that sort of, what was there, 200 meg, 100 and something megs, so probably like nearly 600 megs worth of software. It would pull in over 3G. We don't want to do that. That's going to be a problem. What we want to do is preload it. So we want to do, I already did this, so let's keep this right. So Balena preload, then you tell it the image that you want it to, that you're going to do again. So Balena cloud image, and then we just, for this one we need the application ID. It's a bit unusual. As I say, we're looking at how these commands work to try and get a more sort of unified experience. So right, copy and paste. So what this is going to do, it's going to pull in those images and it's going to inject them into the image. So it's going to pull in the service images that we built for our CAN init, CAN dump, web API, and it's going to put them into the OS image, okay? So it does all this with a Docker container in the back end. So a lot, again, you'll notice a theme. A lot of the stuff we do is based around Docker for the consistency factors. Fun fact, this doesn't work if you're using a Mac. So if anyone's got a Mac and they try and do it, you can thank Docker for Mac for this. They removed auth support. So we're working on a way to rectify whether we find a way around that limitation. So
is Balena preload running a Docker container on your machine at the moment?
Yeah.
Oh, so you have to have Docker installed to do this?
Yeah. So you get to choose the release. You can pass it as an argument, but it's easier not to. So we've only got one, funnily enough. So we'll tell it to take the current release. You can actually pick one and pin it. So if you were doing, I don't know, let's say you got a particular product and you wanted them to all go out the door with one particular release, and then you would choose in the future to upgrade people, for example, then you can do that and you'd pin it to that one. So no matter what happened, it would come online, it wouldn't try and pull in an update. It would just stay on the current one. Which is what I'm telling mine to pull the current one every time. So it'll come online, it'll have the current image now, but when it comes online, it will then receive updates straight away. I've not pinned it, which is fine. I don't need to pin it. Okay, so that image is done. So I need that. The image should be prepared and ready now, so I can drop that into my memory card. I should be able to go back to there. Yeah, that's what I want. We're going to choose that image that we just prepared. That one. Flash it. Go for it.
You put the SD card back
In the Pi?
Yeah, but it was not powered.
No, habit. And also, if I put it on the table, it's like a black and red card. And earlier I put it down and I was like, yeah, where's that gone? So I thought if I put it somewhere where I know where it is, I don't have to worry. Sorry, you can't see what I'm doing. I'm just flashing the thing with Etcher. So yeah, has anybody got any questions at this point? No? Assuming this all works, by the way, the next step is we're going to just add a fin, download the image, preload it, put the fin on, and it's going to work. That's the theory. And we will have done all the way from nothing to a fully working product. Cool, he's flashed. Right, so this is the bit where the demo gods have to be kind. So we have SD card is in, I've attached the modem, it's connected to the vehicle, and I'm just going to add the power, so there's no Ethernet on this at all. Okay. We will flick back to the dashboard. So we can see this device is now offline. And we'll just wait. Now, we should know when it's come online because this IP address will change. That's the internal Ethernet IP address. So we should see it report the 3G base connection. Now, this modem sometimes chooses to give me an internal like NATed connection, and sometimes it chooses to just directly put me through. So I'm not quite sure what's going to happen, which one we'll get, but it should come online. It came online the other day, so I'll be happy with that.
So you just put the SD card from the Pi in the fin?
No, you can't put an SD card in the fin.
Can't put an SD in the fin. So all I've done is I've pre-configured that image with the application and with the GSM, and I've put that image on the SD card in the Pi. Okay. For the Pi, because we already had it on there, we didn't really need to preload it, but I just wanted to make sure that I demonstrated that that was working and explained it. When we do the fin, I'll preload the fin because it will never have had that software on at all. So it would try and download the full 200, 300 megs worth of software.
Yeah. So the reason that I got confused is because I thought you were waiting for the fin to pop up there, but that's the Pi device.
Yeah.
That raises the question: if I put the flash image of an SD card into a different Pi, what would happen? Would it show up as the same device or a different device? Probably
Same one.
It shows up as the same device.
Even though it's got a different MAC address for it?
Yeah, it's not based on the MAC address. Inside the boot image, you'll see that there's a config file with a UUID and a corresponding device key, and that's its essentially username and password, which is what it shows up on here.
Flash the SD card, that's still there.
Oh, bonus points.
So you get second seconds.
You get 2 stickers for that one. Yeah, no, you've completely I threw myself there. Yeah, it should be a new device, so it should show up, but I'm yet to see it, which means I either did something wrong or the GSM signal's bad. I'm kind of hoping that I just did something wrong.
Your stick's doing stuff.
I know, it's flashing,
I don't know
isn't it?
what that means, like, from doing stuff.
Oh, come on. I'm not getting any death blinks off it. I wonder whether I'm sure I did it this way around before, whether the preload nobbled the... Shouldn't have done. It did take a while the first time I did it, but...
You are getting death blinks.
No, that's like it was booted.
Is 4 flashes not I can't get network, or is it 3?
I can't remember.
My network always works, so I don't get this problem, obviously.
Okay. Well, the last thing we did was... we'll just do this. So we've already preloaded it. Let's add the files again. If in doubt, flash it again. That's the way to do it. Yeah, so the modem does some unusual blinking. I don't want to like kill it just as it started. Come on, be there. You know you want to. Right, you get turned off. Cool. This is because the demo gods didn't turn up today. So as I say, there's this whole preparation of images, it's something that we've always been able to do these operations, but recently a few of us have kind of said, yeah, we need to sort of address this now because we've added so many different features, and we want to try and effectively align like how you do it, which way to do it. You know, in reality, is preloading the application any different from adding a connection? As far as the user's concerned, it's kind of the same operation. So at the moment, having this two-stage operation can be perhaps confusing. So yeah, we want to try and address that if we can.
One thing I wanted to ask before before the presentation was, if I want to give a device to a customer, I don't want the ability to snoop around on their network. But I'm giving that ability on it, and that's kind of the intent of Deliver, isn't it? So I'm able to do that sort of thing.
Yeah, I mean, you know,
our intent isn't to snoop on people's networks, just to clarify.
I think you've got to take a page out of Uncle Ben's book there and think that, you know, with great power comes great responsibility, and that one is on you. Yeah, I know what you mean. Unfortunately, there is kind of not really a way around that. You know, if you're going to put a managed device in someone else's network, then inherently it's going to need access like to that network in order to get to you. So there's almost an implied ability to access it.
There's an exercise left for the local network admin. I think it's not.
Yeah, I mean they could always segment you.
If you don't trust our device, put it in isolated VLAN. You get lots of options for it, but they're not really our options to make. That's
well, you have your option to grant access to the device. You can access that device anyway, is that correct?
Like a handful of people at the company have that, you know, there's the super admins that we need for necessity of, you know, the ability to fix when things really break. But most staff that can't just go in and unless you explicitly say, grant support, they can't do anything, they can't see it, effectively it doesn't exist to them.
Yeah, no, I think it can be frustrating sometimes because a customer will say to you, like, I've given you support access to this device, and there's a fixed window on how often, like how long they'll give you support for. And so sometimes you'll go in and you'll start doing an investigation. And for whatever reason, it might take longer than that window. And you have to keep going back and asking for like more support time. And so yeah, there is an ability there to have like an admin level access, but it's granted at the sort of behest of very senior people in the company, and if you haven't got an absolute solid reason why you would want to do that, then it's just not given. So if that was a concern, then like realistically it shouldn't be a concern, because it's the kind of thing where, you know, we're going to be pushing bits into your device at an automated level anyway, so you've got to have a certain level of trust with us, and as a company we would like to think that we would be trusted enough as it is. So certainly it's not the case that, you know, any old Tom, Dick or Harry in the company can just grab and get onto someone's device at all. We take that whole position very seriously. It's
it was a long time ago. That was effectively how we as a matter of support, we got into devices. So you fast forward, I don't know, 2.5 years to today, and that's now a situation where I say 4 people or something at the company can probably do it. So we're going in the right direction, and eventually we'd like to end up in somewhere a bit more trustless, you know, where you can just drop this device in, and even if everyone in the company, you know, even if everyone in the company could do whatever to it, we couldn't, because it's, you know, you can guarantee we're locked out, but you don't have to trust us. So that's the direction we'd like to go in, but it's not the easiest path, so we're getting there slowly but surely.
Okay, so it still didn't work, and I can't for the life of me work out why it's not worked, so I'm chucking the Ethernet cable into it because I want to know. It should have worked. While it's going to do its thing, wherever it is, it'll either pop up or it won't. What I'm going to do now is I'm going to prepare for the fin. So we're going to assume that it worked, okay? I'm going to assume that it worked because it worked the other day on my desk at home, so I'm a bit miffed. What I'm going to do is I'm going to add the fin. So the fin's on obviously the compatible list, as we've discussed. I want a production image. Do I want a production image?
It's not going to help you if it's not production this late stage.
I'm just thinking I won't be able to jump on and see why if it didn't work, but
just to loop back to the start briefly, 2.38 is the latest fin image OS we've got out, which is why we went back to 2.38.
I wanted them to be the same.
Pi 3 earlier.
So yeah, we'll download that, and it's going to be the same process. The images are in the same format, work in the same way. Again, you can see it's all named the same apart from the fin, so we'll just download it. see something off there. The fact it hasn't even come up on the...
You should go onto the device and go into settings and you can click on get support.
Yeah, go to Will. Will, why is this not working? Alright, so I'm going to drop onto... Okay, so it's definitely on local network, so... Yeah. I'll just copy that. So, because it's a development device, I can just jump onto SSH, just so you know. You know what? Home. Yeah, so the file did get put in, so I can only assume this has come down to, like physically there's just no signal or something on the network. Yeah.
Definitely blame external third parties for this one.
I mean, it says it's connected, but, well, maybe I didn't pay the bill. I mean, I would be amazed if that was the case, because I know for a fact that it's got data, so I don't know why, but yeah, it should have worked. You get to see some live support here, so this is what we would do if... Oh, I do love it when it falls to pieces. Yeah, I know, okay.
Looks like you're hitting a captive portal or something with those TLS connections, maybe. Cert not valid. Cert not yet valid.
Yeah.
It's either times or a,
oh no,
or
it's
a
the
gift
time.
gap.
It's the time.
Always the time.
Right. Wow. So this is embarrassing, isn't it? Just what you want to show. So.
It's just a big massive advertisement for the thing that's got a real size.
No.
I like this.
No, I've never do something such as that. But if you do a curl on something, let's just see. I reckon you might be right, Will. It might be a captive portal. Interestingly enough, I never hit a captive portal the other day when I was doing something, so... That is the one that should...
Yeah, do a HTTP curl and see if it redirects it instead.
No, yeah, but I want to see the certificate. Well, where's the one where it shows you?
Yeah, it's going as far as the certificate then.
There's one where it shows you the whole certificate, isn't there?
I mean, OpenSSL Connect. And I couldn't tell you that.
It definitely no. It does get Google though. Look, so it's.
No, it's not a captive portal.
It's just
I mean,
the
they don't want to
time.
watch
It is. It's
Google
just the
things.
time. But I'm wondering why the time server didn't start.
It's a check crony.
Yeah.
I mean, yeah, no, because that would have worked before. Oh god.
Do you know how often I have to do this? Very rarely. Anyway, I think what probably will have happened is that it's interesting actually to show you this, because this is the kind of problem we get, but we get it from a remote perspective. So people will say to us like, oh, we just didn't connect, why is this? And so we have to try and go through this phase of like diagnosis and understanding. There's so many moving parts.
I've got a message for you from David T. They're all enjoying this a lot.
Yeah, I imagine they are. They're probably all wetting themselves. Watching him sweat.
I've been getting messages on my watch like constantly, trying to ignore them. Give him a wave.
I'll tell you what we're going to do. We're going to push on, and we're just going to configure the fin.
Crony D, by the way.
Is it? I thought it might have been. Well, I rebooted it now, so I don't care. It got told to go away. So what I'm going to do is that fin image should have finished downloading. So we are going to just say sod it, and we're going to flash a fin. So actually, we're not going to flash a fin, are we? We'll pre-configure the image first. Give me that back. So we're going to do the same command set, but this time we're going to do it on the fin image. So we're going to give it the cell data, we're going to give it the reconfigure. So that's the Raspberry Pi one, that's a Raspberry Pi one, that's a fin one. Bloop. And again, that's our whole goal with this is consistency. So if you're used to doing it on a Pi, then it's the same on a fin. So like your process is going to end up, it's always that consistency on the process. Cool. Right. Let's go for. You also get the benefit of being able to just run the same commands and just change the name of the image. So we're going to choose fin, CM3. So this is going to preload the software stack onto the image, so it doesn't have to do the big download.
You going to try div graph again?
Mate, that's working already because it's gone blue, so I can tell. I think what must have happened is it couldn't get the time because the connection wasn't right, and then for some reason it just didn't retry to get the time.
Scrap this up.
Yeah. So it's an interesting one. We need to investigate that because that shouldn't have happened.
You know, in the docs file,
Yeah.
you've got the Lino one with the V7, and you can replace that with a variable.
Yeah.
That's fine. But does it not know what it is and just get the right output?
So it does. If you change it from like Dockerfile to Dockerfile.template, then you can provide a templated form, so %arch type and things, and it will pull in from the builder.
So if I do the doc, can I not just say from every instruction it knows?
You're talking about the way manifests work here, multiple architectures in Docker.
Yeah, that is what you would do. Our cloud builders at this time don't support the manifest. So if you go to like Debian and Stretch, then they've got one image manifested for different architectural types. And then so what happens is on the pull, the Docker engine will look and say, well, I'm this type, so I'll pull that particular one. Whereas ours just takes, I think, the first one, or it certainly doesn't pick the right one. I got bitten by that when I was building this demo up because I wanted to use those base images because it's what you guys would be more used to. We're working on fixing that. It's something that was never a thing. So when we started it didn't exist, and then like Docker have added it, and then everyone's gone, yeah, we'll jump on board with that, and all of a sudden, like we've missed that step, if you know what I mean. I would say it's coming definitely. So I've preloaded it. I now want to do the configure, which will put in the in. So you can see I'm running the same commands on both what would be the fin image and on the, yeah, we're good. So I need my little red cable. I dropped it in the bag somewhere. It's over here. So to flash a fin, there's no SD card, you can't take it out. So we don't need to mess with the Pi. You just need a little USB, a fin, and you connect it to the debug port. There we go. Some lights come on. And then what we've done is Etcher supports flashing, because the fin obviously isn't a USB mass storage. I can't remember the name of it now, but it's the Raspberry Pi specific. Is it U-boot or something like that? I can't remember what it is.
Something like that, yeah.
USB something. Irrelevant, it just has a name, but it's not mass storage.
It's a thing.
It's a thing.
We'll put it on the internet.
So
it's a fin image from the file and then writes the fin rather.
No, so it actually, you can choose the device you want to write to. So if I have an SD card connected, then it would be a target on here, no matter what the image is. But it takes a little bit of extra to get this bit in. So that's why we wanted it all through a consistent process. So you're using all the same tools. So we're choosing the compute module and we're going to flash it. This will then write to the fin. I'm willing to bet with that Ethernet cable on that other thing's booted fine. It has.
No? Hey. Oh, yeah. All right.
As it should have done. All the software was there. It's got both network connections. So what I'll do is while we're...
Is it fin connecting through the mobile network?
The fin will be in a minute. It's currently flashing, but I'm saying the Pi that we...
Right, yeah.
The troublesome Pi. So I'm going to yank that cable. So that Pi is now only on 3G.
So if you yank out Ethernet connection out of that Pi, will it fail over to try and use the cellular?
How is it seeing the fin on the web interface now?
It's not yet. The fin's still flashing.
Right.
So
Yeah.
this is the Pi that when we reflashed the image and put it on there, it should have shown up, but it didn't. Yeah, so it is now because we rebooted it, so it's had a chance to get it. I think there's I don't know why it didn't pull the time down. So anyway, that should be as it is. We can enable the public device URL, so that this is now, or should be now, if it's working.
Totally playing with fire there.
It won't, I know, totally playing with fire, because I yanked the Ethernet cable. I reckon it won't have switched over yet.
There's no way is it reconnected yet.
Not yet, but it will. It will. Well, it was blue before, and now it's becoming green, so it could be anything. What you should see is the same page. Yeah, it hasn't updated itself.
My face, I promise.
Yeah, it's definitely lost the network connection. That is weird that it's done that. Let's see, I want to see what the Finn's up to.
See this, we should have had a proper PCI Express modem on the pin and it would have worked perfectly, obviously.
It's nothing to do, I don't know why it's done that. It's interesting as a problem, I'm not sure why it's manifested. I guess this is where if it was easy, then everyone would be doing it, wouldn't they? So.
But then whenever you're doing something in front of the audience,
Yeah, I had a friend when I was at uni who used to say that computers are like children. They'll do anything when you're like alone with them on their own. If you ask them to do this, run this program, do that, they'll do it. Then you say to your mate, come and look at this, and they just doesn't do it.
Yeah,
it's like, yeah, I figured it went offline in the end. It definitely doesn't seem to, I wonder if the connectivity is slow on the modem, like if it's maybe only GSM, and so it takes too long to get it, and then the time doesn't update for some reason, and then it can't do its TLS, because its time would be right now. So, and I'm sure like the green flashy thing is like, it shouldn't be green, it should be blue. So, I think green is like not ready yet or something. So, let's see. Okay, Finn's done. So the Finn flash is the same as the Pi, but it's just straight to it. What I'm going to do is, we're going for this all the way. So to run the Finn, you need like a 12 volt or a barrel jack power source. We also got a Phoenix connector on there, so if you were integrating this into something like a real truck, then you'd want to put this into an enclosure with a proper commercial connector, which is what the Phoenix is for.
Is that lock-in so it can't?
It's got some kind of latching and stuff on there, yeah, but typically, like we've got a case and it's got like Phoenixes internally and then headers that break off to give you a big block on the outside, and it's typically what you'd see on like PLCs and stuff inside of automated environments, whereas, yeah. So the nice thing with it is that the footprints and stuff, all the dimensions and the technical drawings for it are available. So if you wanted to actually build a full enclosure for this, we do offer a plastic enclosure that's fairly flexible. But yeah, you can make it fit whatever you need. So we have a power adapter. I guess me and this Pi are obviously not friends, so he can just go in the bin when I get home. Shame, go in the bin of shame for not working. No, I'm going to just leave that unplugged for now. I might have to run to the window with it. So again, we're leveraging the fact that the hardware is compatible, so we can just take our existing hat that worked before, we can drop it on. This supports PoE, by the way. I haven't mentioned that to anybody. I don't know if anyone saw that on the one I passed around. So if you've got like the original Pi PoE hat, straight on. It's great for stuff like that. And power it off. Let's see. It's nice to have a bit of lights. It's just what we need. I know. There's as much as... Yeah. I'd like to hear a modem connect. That's what I'd like. Back from the 90s, that would make me feel better. Yeah. What annoys me is that it was blue a minute ago when it was connected over the Ethernet. So it obviously can get the signal, so I don't know why it decided not to do it. If this doesn't work, I'm just going to shove the Ethernet cable in it, and at least you'll be able to. I do recall it taking a minute or two when I had this tested at home. But yeah, it does seem to be sort of signal dependent, or there's certainly some kind of component in there that causes it to be either very reliable or very not reliable.
Not is the case, maybe.
Or not in this case, yeah. Oh well. You wait, I'll get home, I'll connect it, it'll just go blue, straight on, happy days. Oh!
Oh.
A blue light. A solid blue light. Come on, 3 for 3. Show up on the dashboard. Screw you, man. Screw you. Come on. Well, that's a bit anticlimactic, isn't it?
You had production image as well, didn't you?
Huh?
Did you go production image?
I think so. It wouldn't matter. As soon as I connected the Ethernet cable to it, it would show up.
Of course, sorry.
But it's more the fact that it should stay showed up. I put 6 gig on it 2 days ago, and I've only used it for about 1 meg. So yeah, it's definitely not that. I think I've got a theory that it's taking too long to get a connection, and therefore something's timing out in the background, so it's not retrying. I'm not 100% sure, but yeah. I mean, we're giving it the right application information. It's properly, and the preload shouldn't matter. It's only the cellular modem configured.
It's a common error between that and the pilot, isn't it?
Yeah. Well, and the commonality is that modem.
That's really cheap. That's really
Yeah.
cheap.
Oh. Yeah.
Wave it around out the window.
Oh, that would be nice. Does that still work these days? I remember doing that to send a text message, but I don't remember if it still works these days. Right.
That's a shame reload on the page.
Well, it should be reloading in the background anyway. It's updated live.
It's just at the end of the No, it's not.
It's not that one.
We've had some success though, because Neil he is deployed through applications to his pies at home.
Okay.
Oh, fantastic. We should have got you up front then. Still better than us.
If in doubt, reboot it. Well, what I'm going to do is, if it doesn't hook up now, then I'm going to...
If in doubt, give it an actual network connection.
Yeah.
We seem to be at the stage where everyone's throwing the questions out as they get them now, but anyone sitting on a question they need answering?
A really long question. One that's going to take us ages to explain while we wait for this thing to do something.
What is the meaning of life?
42. Next question.
Yeah.
Everyone knows. Is there a way, like with your VPN stuff, that there's a way of turning that off?
Yes.
The VPN, yeah.
Is there a way from the device to get the device to kind of turn it back on again?
If you were logged into it, you could just start the VPN service.
So you could possibly add a thing. So I'm wondering about kind of like Matt was asking earlier about you could poke around somebody's network, but it's like, well, I would also not like to be able to poke around my clients or customers' network. So maybe I can have a way where the device gets given to them, and then they can trigger a thing and say like, re-enable the VPN because
You can trigger it remotely as well, though. So it's the setting would polled by the supervisor, which is just a standard poll. So every sort of 10 minutes, it says, to the API, anything changed, and say, yeah, you need VPN back on. So that's not going to help you there, I'm afraid.
Okay, so the device has come online, and I'm pretty sure
Nothing's working.
Well, it's not so much that. I'm not sure what it's doing at this point, but because we just plugged it in to start with, it needs to pick up the boot changes and it hasn't done it.
What boot change?
The configuration, host DC params.
I thought you applied them fleet-wide.
I did apply them
okay.
fleet-wide. See? So it's not that anyway, but yeah, it's done its thing. Oh, I knew the wheels would come off the wagon at some point. Never goes the way you want.
We were doing quite well, I think.
Yeah, it was all going well until we actually asked it to do something. So yeah, I know that every person in this situation would say the same thing, but this is very atypical. It does not do this at all. It just seems to want to have a little play up.
If you've got two of them, I can take it. They've got hooked up to the motor, because I can take it like down there and see if it gets a better signal.
Well, I've plugged it in over the Ethernet now, you see. So, and it's still taken a while to update, so I'm not really sure what's going on with that, because that shouldn't do that. Like, it does at the top. Oh yeah, and it does
there as well.
Hang on, what?
Go back to your device list. Have you got 3 Pis in that app now?
Pull the fin. Didn't flash the wrong image. I can hear that. I wish it was.
Can you connect to it? No. Oh, you might be able to.
Well, I don't know the IP address for a start off. And why is it showing itself as a Pi 3?
Through the console, and then check the device type, I was thinking to see which OS you'd flash to.
You mean from here?
Yeah. If it'll let you in, I don't know, because it appears to be in some sort of weird. There you go.
What is it,
Is it an OS release maybe? I just forget. I have to boot around in ETC for ages. That's where I'd go first. Yeah, that's weird.
That is weird.
Could just be a UI bug, possibly.
Well, apologies, because that is really took the shine off the end. Still seems to have issues with that. The time and stuff's correct this time though. That looks more like it can't talk
that
through
looks
the
like DNS is being overridden, doesn't it?
Yeah, so that's the USB, that's the stick telling it what to do.
That's sending you to a captive portal again, I reckon. Or not again. I don't really. Definitely blame GitGaf.
It's definitely the USB stick, then.
And then presumably that dodgy
Problem
DNS
solved.
response has been cached and that they won't come back.
Yeah. Well. Come on. No, it was actually connected over that. Well. Oh, is it back now? I bet it's willing to communicate now, isn't it? Oh, look, here it is. Yeah, it's probably something to do with the stick. So the software's pulled down. It should it's going to have to reboot the device because it's not. But it should have seen that. Don't know why it's not doing it. Christ, that's a small text box. So these are the logs. So you can see it's having errors running the stuff, and that's because the due to the way it booted up badly because of that 3G modem, it's not pulled the device configuration. So I think what I'm going to do is just reboot it now. And then the idea was we'd have a nicely disconnected product ready to go, but since it doesn't want to work because of the 3G modem, I guess we'll have to wrap it up at that. Thank you for paying attention. Sorry that we ran over by about half an hour. I think we're about an hour longer than we thought we would be. Yeah, I'll try and work out why that didn't work. Thank you.
Thanks very much.
Oh, fantastic. So just before...
You and me say failure differently.
I did say before, we had some chats beforehand, and they said, is the Wi-Fi okay? I said, we've got fantastic Wi-Fi here, you know, we're all geeks around here. He said, is the Ethernet okay? I said, we've got some of the best Ethernet in Liverpool. We've got better broadband downstairs, piping in Ethernet. We've got better Ethernet than anywhere. Cellular, I apologise for the cellular.
No.
It's out of my control. If I could have done it, I'd blame giffgaff, quite frankly. If there's anything we could have done, cellular is obviously not good up north.
I thought you'd have a femto selling for us.
Yeah. But just to say thank you all for coming. Thank you everybody for listening in to this live stream on YouTube, on the DOES Liverpool channel. Our Master at Arms here, Method Dan, will be editing this down and posting in the near future, as is his wont. Here at DOES Liverpool in the Fabric District and the Knowledge Quarter of Liverpool, or our co-location workspace and a hack space. Come and see us. Every Thursday night is Maker Night, open to all. Every second Tuesday, I think it is, Adrian, isn't it, of the month is Maker Day. On a Saturday, it's second Tuesday.
Saturday?
It's late, it's been a long night.
Every second Tuesday?
Every second Saturday, all day long, it's Maker Day. Again, open, come and see us, come and join us. I know there's a couple of new attendees tonight. You're very welcome to come along and have a quick wander around over a beer. And I think probably all that remains for me to do is to say to Rich and to Will, you know, cellular nonsense notwithstanding, thank you so much for both an accessible and also very, very comprehensive demonstration of what Balena is capable of. I mean, I've been following these guys since they started up, and I was learning stuff tonight. It's absolutely brilliant. So please join me in a round of applause for these guys, and thank you.